Yes. Well, I guess
And it's on their property.
Huh?
It's not on their property, it's in the street.
Yeah. Your yard is clean.
It's pretty obvious. I don't know for sure.
I know. And maybe we could say something to them?
I could send them a letter, not a violation.
Yes.
But just a letter, I can't ask them to remove it.
No.
Well, they did.
Well, we're gonna clean it up.
I'll do that. I'll send them a letter saying.
Just say, just so you know,
You can't put your leaves in.
Yeah, you can't put your leaf pile in the street. Right over there. I mean, it's a mountain of weeds.
And there's not a leaf on there.
And our yard is pristine.
You know they do. You know what they do.
Oh my god.
Good.
This is Chris.
Hey, Chris. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. No, George had it all. I think he's had it all along. Check with George. Oh, he has it. Yeah. Yes, that's Hey, Charlie, I'm gonna put that on there.
How are you? Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Yeah, no. Anything else?
This conference will now be recorded.
Yes. Right.
Potentially challenging.
Good to go. Beautiful. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Mayoral Town Hall about redevelopment in Dunellen, and an important topic. And this is our last Town Hall series for the year. We'll start up next year, but before we start the presentation, we got a crowd here this evening. I think it's important we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thanks for joining us here this evening in person and those who are joining us virtually. this is an important topic. It's been a conversation that Dunellen's been having for, Ken, for how many years? Over 20 some odd years? 21 years. Let's recognize Ken Vaudendistel here this evening. He's our former council president, served on the council for over 18 years, and was vital in helping getting the foundation started for redevelopment in Dunellen. So thanks for being here this evening. And thank you to Councilmember Terry Albertson for being here this evening, and our interim business administrator, Alex Miller. So this evening we have a lot on the agenda, and so my piece of the agenda is to discuss the history of redevelopment in Dunellen. I'm going to try to be as quick as possible because we have a lot of panelists that we're very happy to be here. I will act as your moderator. I'll have the honor to introduce our panelists on their various topics. So let's get started. So in Dunellen, we have been discussing redevelopment for, as Ken Vaudendistel noted, for over 21 years. So in 2001, then Mayor Dunellen, Mayor Robert Cedar and the Borough Council authorized Dunellen Planning Board to conduct a preliminary investigation on whether the areas between the Route 28 and Middlesex to Plainfield qualified as an area in need of redevelopment. This then led us to 2003. The prior authorization from the Mayor and Borough Council of the study by the Planning Board resulted in a report on a study to determine the qualification of the Dunellen Downtown Redevelopment Study Area as a redevelopment area, and was presented and adopted by the Dunellen Planning Board on April 28, 2003. This report and resolution were forwarded to the Mayor and Borough Council, which was accepted by resolution dated May 5th, 2003, designated the subject area in need of redevelopment. So this was the start. By 2004, in July, the Downtown Redevelopment Plan, Phase 1, was adopted by ordinance with periodical updates over time. This document is the basic zoning and land use blueprint for redevelopment. We'll hear more about that in our planning section. It designated 3 sites. Site 1, which is Train Station North, which is along Route 28. Site number 2, which is Train Station South, which is where the library and parking lot for the train station is. And site number 3, it's the 19 acres between the train tracks and Columbia Park, commonly known as the Art Color Complex, now the Dunellen Station Project. Later, it would be amended to add a 4th site, known as the remainder parcels, as the next phases of our redevelopment area. These properties were located, or are located, on both sides of the street of North Avenue and Boundbrook Road, from Middlesex to the Plainfield border, as we commonly know as Route 28. In late 2004, the owners of the Art Color Complex made it known that they wanted to turn the site into what was commonly used as warehouse or industrial property, and turn it into a more attractive mixed-use development, where people would be living, retail would be there. Several proposals were heard from the initial project. This then led to 2006. The mayor and council designated Kaplan Companies as the redeveloper. A condition of the designation was that the agreement between the borough and Kaplan Companies be arrived within a certain time, as most conditional agreements, as we'll probably touch on tonight, are needed. And by 2007, Kaplan was de-designated as of January 2007 as a developer. An agreement could not be reached, and Baker Residential, another developer, then became the redeveloper at that time. Between 2007 and 2008, before the borough and Baker Residential could arrive at an agreement, we clearly all know what happened. We had the financial meltdown in 2007-2008, and the formal redevelopment activities, not just in Dunellen, but most communities, were put on hold because of the economy. By 2017, the economy slowly began to recover. I know that's over a decade now we're talking about. The Art Color owners came and again expressed an interest in developing the site. This time they would do so in a partnership with established builders. So on July 13th, 2017, the Mayor and Borough Council, by resolution, entered into an agreement with Brudner Redevelopment Partners, Urban Renewal LLC. It was agreed upon that the 19-acre Art Color site, now known as the Dunellen Station, would become home to 130 townhouses for sale units and 252 apartments that were rentals, with 58 of those rentals being for affordable housing. We also were able to obtain a 10,000 square foot commercial retail site where the old World Gym's location was. Residents of the complex were being promoted as having access to a clubhouse, which today they do, with a community room, barbecue area, weight room, and pool. It was proposed that it would become a home for over 600 new Dunellen residents. The development of the Art Color Complex was to be done by two developers, K. Hovanian, who would build the townhouses, and Prism Capital, who would build the apartment and retail space. Both companies, as we all know, have many years of experience in redevelopment sites throughout New Jersey and surrounding states. So by 2020, knowing that we were now entering our next phase of redevelopment with a project that was signed, sealed, delivered, and just now had to really be built, the mayor and council, at the time I was the mayor, appointed DMR Architects as our municipal planner, Mr. Dan over here, as a professional service, because we realized as a municipality, we historically had not had a municipal planner. We needed one in this next revitalization era of our town. Unfortunately, we all know what happened in 2020. March through July of 2020 and subsequent year, COVID-19 impacted everywhere. And so the Dunellen Station project was halted due to state and county offices closing down, supply chain issues, etc. So that did put the project on hold. But we didn't waste time. We still used this as an opportunity to speak to our community members and hear what they wanted to see go on in Dunellen. So together with DMR Architects, we created a community vision plan for Dunellen. It was developed and issued to the residents and business owners to better understand the community's preferences as we continue to welcome new redevelopment into Dunellen's downtown. In 2021, the results of the visual preference survey guided changes in Dunellen's existing redevelopment plans, designs, and standards, and development guidelines. Construction resumed at the Dunellen Station project, as we can see, in 2001 as well, and the full completion, as we can see, is we're going to see in 2024. So since 2020, there has been an increased interest by small, mid, and larger developers to build within Dunellen's redevelopment area, and more projects will be presented this evening, and more are being discussed as we move forward. So, in 2022, what did we do? We continued to build upon Dunellen's current revitalization success in downtown Dunellen by welcoming new investments in our central business district. Since 2020, there has been close to $58 million of investments coming into town. That's on top of the $110 million that the Dunellen project is being invested in Dunellen. So overall, within the last, well, I would say, less than 10 years, over $168 million is being invested in our town, which is pretty great for a square mile community. Not to mention, we've welcomed many different businesses. We've diversed our profile on that. We've welcomed cafes, we're welcoming little boutiques, which is a great thing for our downtown. It's what we're trying to do through redevelopment. Many new eateries as well. So we also amended the redevelopment plan in 2022 to allow wineries, distilleries, and breweries throughout the redevelopment zone. The entire downtown, you can open one, just in case anyone's listening tonight or anybody knows anybody. You know, we haven't struck gold just yet, but one thing is you have to plan for it, right, Dan? So it's there for when somebody knocks on the doors. We don't then have to go rushing around to, you know, create an ordinance, wait 2 hearings, and then hope the council and planning board approve it. It's done. It's there. So it's there. We amended the redevelopment plan to require that native plantings, rain gardens, and pervious pavement is required in the developments, because as we develop, we want to also be environmentally friendly. Where does this water and stormwater management go? This is what also assists. We also approved a short-term tax abatement program to allow property owners to take advantage of a 5-year tax incentive to improve their properties. We're going to hear about pilots, and we're going to hear about the short-term tax incentive program. Pilots are usually larger projects, larger time periods. In the 5-year, as we were giving pilots, negotiating pilots with I guess you could say larger developers for bigger parcels of land, we realized, well, hey, the smaller folk, the smaller businesses or property owners, they should be able to get in on the game too. So we created a 5-year short-term tax abatement program for smaller property owners who might just want to do a new kitchen, or they want to attract a restaurant into their current building, but they need the assistance to basically put the kitchen in, or new facade, new windows, etc. I think you get the point. We also conducted a master plan reexamination program to allow property, I apologize, which was part of an interconnected planning initiative alongside the Dunellen's climate resiliency planning, first in the state, just let Governor Murphy know that, a cannabis survey, I think I have the wrong letter at the end of my name, so I don't know if he's going to give me street cred, an active transportation study by the New Jersey Transit's transit-friendly planning program, and a complete streets green policy for all by the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. So as you can see, we've been conducting many community surveys. We've worked very well with the Blaustein School over at Rutgers, which you're going to hear from tonight. Since 2017, I think we've conducted about, what would you say, Alex, over 10 surveys? So maybe less than 10, but it's been at least 1 or 2 per year. So we're really hearing from the community, and these town halls also provide the opportunity to give us your feedback, because as we redevelop, we want to hear from you as a community, because you're just as part of this process as well. If you don't invest in it and buy into it, then we're not going to be successful, because we have to be our own real estate agents as residents and elected officials in the community. That's my little pitch. So here we are in 2023. The borough continued to build upon its current revitalization successes in downtown Dunellen by welcoming again more new investments. And I'm very excited you're going to see some of these projects this evening, from what the old property looked like to what they are now or what they're going to be. And believe me, downtown space is going to look magnificent in the next 10 years. We updated the master plan based upon the 2022 master plan reexamination, with elements related to, again, climate resiliency, transit-friendly planning for walking, biking, public transportation, as well as including complete and green streets elements. We amended the plan to also include, well, we have the film industry coming back to New Jersey, and we're within 30 miles of the city, and so that's one of the criteria. So we created, in our redevelopment area, for film industry and production studios to be built or operate in our industrial complexes. We allow artists live and work studios, groceries and supermarkets, entertainment and institutional uses. So we'll get in a little deeper on that with the planner. And then, what are we looking ahead in 2024? We're looking to continue on building on this success that we've been having, this revitalization success in our downtown. We're going to consider a downtown improvement district, maybe with a Main Street. You're going to hear about that as well. We're going to continue to work with New Jersey Department of Transportation. Our goals are to implement some of the rapid flashing beacon lights at key intersections. Through redevelopment agreements, we've been able to negotiate community benefits specifically for pedestrian and traffic safety measures in the downtown. I see you guys made a recommendation. You had the foresight. We negotiated those funds, and they're there, so we put the resolution into New Jersey Department of Transportation, so that's coming. We'll be at key intersections that don't have traffic lights. Speaking of traffic lights, we're in conversations with NJDOT again about doing studies at the 2 intersections downtown, North Washington and North, Madison and North, about assessing whether they need turn signals. So we're looking at that as a future plan and hopefully to implement. The Dunellen Station project is set to be completed in 2024, and we're looking forward to this spurring some economic growth in our downtown, continue to do so. So without further ado, that was my presentation. And next up, we have Dunellen Planning and Redevelopment Initiatives. This is going to be discussed by Daniel Halbin. He is our planner from DMR Architects. He's a senior planner since 2019. He is not just the municipalities, but he's also the planning boards. He has a Master of City and Regional Planning, Real Estate from Rutgers University, and Bachelor's of Arts, Geography, Urban Planning from Thank you, Binghamton University. So, Daniel, thank you for being here.
Good evening, everybody. Can we hear me? Great. No one responded, but somebody say great after the fact. Good evening. My name is Dan Haven, as the mayor said. Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. Just for some background, I am from DMR Architects. We are located in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, just outside of Hackensack. The planning team at DMR is comprised of Fran Reiner, who's one of the partners and the director of the planning department. Myself, Dan Howman. My credentials I didn't update, but this was last year. Last year I didn't have the lead certification, so now I'm lead credentials, so there's that too. And David Trost is a part-time planner, assists us with a lot of our work. We're slowly expanding our team. Who are we? Well, we're generally an architecture firm, but we also do interior design and construction administration and some other things that I'm sure I don't know about. But as planners, we're planners for numerous towns across northern New Jersey. We specialize in redevelopment and we're becoming more involved in sustainability planning. We wrote the first community energy plan in the state and as the mayor said, technically the first climate resilience plan in the state as well. Within Dunellen, we wrote the recently adopted 2023 Master Plan Reexamination Report and Climate Resilience Plan. We are involved in the downtown redevelopment process. We've been part of the last few amendments of the redevelopment plan and work with the borough and redevelopers to create products that meet the intent of the redevelopment plan and make Dunellen a stronger community. All right, just a quick background on what a master plan re-examination report is. Well, the state requires every municipality to update their master plan every 10 or so years. You can do a full adoption of your master plan every 10 years, which would cost a lot more and be much more detailed, or you can do a re-examination report, which is essentially captures what has changed since the last master plan was adopted and what recommendations you have to change the master plan based on how things have changed. Some towns do their re-examination reports in a few pages just to meet that statute. We treat our re-examination reports as master plans. We get extremely in-depth and we want to capture everything that's really going on within the community and regionally and globally that makes a difference in every person's and business's everyday experience. The reason you have to adopt a master plan or a re-examination report every 10 years is because it sets the basis for the validity of your zoning. If you don't adopt it, then someone can come and say, well, your zoning isn't valid anymore. I can essentially do something different from what your zoning calls for because you haven't actually planned for what should happen in your town and since 1980s, and as is the case in a couple of towns. I'm not going to tell you who, because then you might sue them. So what we did with the master plan re-examination, besides just working with the borough to understand what the goals were of the mayor and the council and others involved in the government, is we conducted a public outreach process. We held a survey, which we got about, I think, more than 300 responses to. We actually did this in partnership with the Complete Streets team and the transit-friendly planning team from New Jersey Transit and North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. So we captured a wide range of topics to understand what people in the community are concerned about. I'll tell you, they were concerned about a lot of in terms of parking and taxes and flooding, and I want to do so-and-so in the downtown. Why aren't there so-and-so businesses in the downtown? And that has been that guided the master plan re-examination report and some of our work on the redevelopment plan since then. So some of the major topics that were captured in the 2023 adopted re-examination report, which I think was adopted in June or July, is strategies to continue to revitalize the downtown, improving clarity about what sort of uses and businesses we want there to actually make sure those businesses that the residents were asking about can actually be established there. protect residents from, for example, oversized buildings, buildings going too close to their properties, promoting other uses that maybe we hadn't thought about, but that will promote the economic growth of the downtown, and respecting our historic buildings such as the theater on North Avenue. We had a number of recommendations for addressing flooding and stormwater, including zoning policies to reduce impervious coverage, and investments in other policy making and collaboration with other entities to address systems and issues that are taking place not only in Dunellen but along the Green Brook and Vonnegut Brook and within the watershed that affects Dunellen. Cannabis was legalized in the state in 2021, so that was a major factor, assessing what the public felt about cannabis and how that should be considered in the downtown, and the conclusion was essentially find a appropriate balance, and we deferred to the Cannabis Task Force. I don't know what they've been up to, but we'll find out later maybe.
They had their town hall last week.
Oh, they did, okay. There you go. Circulation continuing to promote multimodal accessibility, ensuring that people can bike, walk, take the bus, and drive safely and efficiently in town, and addressing parking standards to ensure, or I guess enhance turnover of parking spaces on curb, improve access to off-street parking spaces, and actually addressing concerns about parking from new development in the downtown, and generally promoting sustainability, including generating renewable energy and meeting the state's guidelines for being ready for the EV, electric vehicle revolution. The climate resilience plan was actually something that a lot of towns are not doing this as a standalone document the way that Dunellen did. This is actually, we followed the process that the state recently required as part of the general master planning process. All new, I'm not going to get too technical, but basically all new full master plans essentially have to include an assessment of climate vulnerability. And we decided we're not going to wait till the next time we do a full master plan. We're going to do it now because we've been hit by some pretty bad storms, including Ida. And as you can see from this map, if you can see the big chunk of purple, that's a whole lot of flood-prone area in town. So that's about, I think, somewhere between a quarter and a third of the town's land area is within the 100-year floodplain. I think that this is FEMA's projection, so I think it's actually worse when you look at the more localized data. But we're required, the analysis is required to analyze current and future threats, so thinking about what, what isn't happening in Dunellen, but may be happening in the next 10 years. Conducting a build-out analysis to assess how much growth the current zoning permits, and how much of that growth is going to take place in flood-prone areas, which is quite a bit. Identifying crucial facilities and evacuation infrastructure in town, so that includes your major roads to get in and out of town and your electric and gas infrastructure. Analyzing the potential impacts of natural disasters on the master plan components, so obviously you're planning for your town's growth and promoting and preserving the quality of life in town, but how much of that is affected by climate change. Improving design standards for addressing stormwater, and making a statement that well, actually I don't know what that means, but I think it meant that something along the lines of the climate resilience plan is consistent with the rest of your master plan, which of course it is, and we have to use the most recent data available from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, which of course we did. So the recommendations of the climate resilience plan were generally consistent with what we recommended in the master plan re-examination in terms of looking at our zoning and design standards with regard to flood consciousness and stormwater. Continuing to work with regional groups to address some of the flooding that is caused by conditions outside of Dunellen, specifically what's upstream from the Vonnegut and Green Brooks. And local action. What can we do locally to improve our stormwater infrastructure? The mayor talked about bioswales and other small installations that, over time and in aggregate do make a big difference in flooding locally. And looking out for grant opportunities, of which there are plenty from the state and the federal government, and some nonprofit groups to fund these initiatives locally. We made some adjustments to the downtown redevelopment plan this year. Actually, the last one was in July. So the downtown redevelopment area has changed since it was first adopted. The mayor said that there were originally 3 major redevelopment sites and then the remaining parcels. Over time, we realized that looking at all the stretch along North Avenue and Bound Brook Road as one chunk is probably not appropriate. There's basically transition areas along the edges that should be considered to protect adjacent residential neighborhoods, to recognize the fact that you really want your highest density and most greatest mix of uses closest to the train station and where all the commercial activity is mostly going to be taking place, and maybe allow for just your standard multifamily building without a store on the bottom toward the edge of town, because people aren't necessarily going to be walking there to have their coffee or buy, I don't know, a laptop. So we've created a few different zones within the downtown. So there's your sites 1, 2, and 3, your 3 major redevelopment sites, and then there's the downtown core, which is what we used to call the remaining parcels. There's the flex transition area, which is the stretch that's currently occupied by some shopping centers and industrial buildings that are appropriate for uses like supermarkets and film and production studios. And then your outer transition areas towards the edge of town, which are appropriate for just residential uses and not necessarily mixed use. We've also did some of what we said we wanted to do in the re-examination report, including clarifying what uses we want in the downtown, permitting new uses that were not previously considered, like artist live work studios, groceries or supermarkets, entertainment, institutional uses, assembly uses like catering halls, and as we said a couple times, film production studios. We wanted to create setbacks to new buildings to residential buildings, created these transition areas, promoted green design to improve stormwater mitigation, promote workforce housing, which is housing for people who make between 80 and 120% of the regional median income, which is beyond what is actually required from the affordable housing requirements from the state, and reducing or modifying our parking standards to be a little bit more conservative about how much parking is produced on site. So these are some of the redevelopment projects that have come on in 2023. I cut out some of the projects that have actually been constructed as of this year. I want to focus on what's actually been kind of on the agenda, what's upcoming, or what's been approved this year. So this is 745 Bound Brook Road. Currently a vacant music studio. I think it might have been demolished already. And what it's going to be is a 3-story 23 apartment residential building. This is in that transition zone. We were saying we don't necessarily need mixed use. 120-126 North Avenue, which was recently approved. It is currently consists of 3 buildings, which include a low-rise retail, 1 building that has apartments over, actually I think that's all apartments. Yeah, that's right, there we go. 1 low-rise retail and 2 apartment buildings that are about 2 stories each. And what's been proposed is a mixed-use building consisting of 3 stories, 33 apartments, and a little over 2,000 square feet of commercial space. 501 North Avenue is in concept phase. It is currently occupied by auto body shops and retail. I think it's a thrift store. What's proposed is 3 stories, 47 apartments, and 3,900 square feet of commercial, currently in concept phase. Working on getting some approvals from DOT, I believe. We recently conducted a study to designate a industrial property on the edge of town, 130 South 2nd Street. It's a former industrial site, largely just gravel with one older building on it. There's no concepts for it yet, but it's been, has it been designated yet? What's it asked about? Not yet designated. Designation, not yet. There's an agreement to redevelop this house, this two-family house at 337 Front Street, to a 2.5-story, 8-apartment building. There's an agreement to replace these 3 buildings, so it's one retail building, I think might have apartments above, drive-through bank.
Does not include that building.
Oh, it doesn't include that building. Well, that's
a bank and rescue squad.
that makes more sense.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that building on the left is not there. You can put your
That's
finger.
on the road. We don't need to be scaring anybody.
Yeah. No, when you're looking at that picture, just put your finger like right over it, and so it's not there. There's a bank and the rescue squad building. Those are going away. Well, there's an agreement. We don't know if they're going away, but what's proposed is a 3-story building consisting of 50 apartments and 3,600 square feet of commercial. 441 North Avenue. 3 properties consisting of an auto body, I think it's a 4-unit apartment building, and offices, which is proposed to be a 3-story building with 60 apartments, 4,200 square feet of commercial, currently just in agreement for that. And 635 Boundbrook Road, there's a agreement, I think that was approved, that is for a property that now is occupied by a vacant 1-story tavern, and it's proposed to be a 3-story Dunellen Rescue Squad building with all the amenities and facilities that they hopefully need to do their business. So that's all I got.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. So before we continue, I just want to note, all our professionals here this evening are working pro bono. They are not charging the town. So let's give them a round of applause for that. And I just want to point out our Deputy Clerk, Lauren Stacks, is here, and I want to thank David and Ryan, our IT, for helping get everything set up too. So I'm going to recognize the people that helped us put this together. Okay, so we talked about 21 years earlier, Ken, you noted, and the next speaker, I think you've been here basically the entire ride, right? Close. Okay, not that long. So our next speaker is our municipal engineer for redevelopment and redevelopment projects, as well as other things in town, Lou Plaskanka. He is a licensed professional engineer and certified municipal engineer in the state of New Jersey. He has over 35 years of experience in the review and construction observation of site, subdivision, and redevelopment applications. Mr. Plaskanka has been employed with CME Associates since 1983 and has provided engineering services to the Borough of Dunellen since 2006. Okay, so just shy of 20-something. So, okay, Lou, thanks for being here this evening, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the engineering process. Once the redevelopment project has an agreement in place, the council has approved the project, then it moves on to the planning board, to a planning board application. So once Dan's office deems the application administratively complete, we get a hold of it and we do a very thorough review of the engineering requirements for the project. The first thing we do is we review it against the borough's land use code, which are the site development standards in town. We review it against the redevelopment plan, which carries its own requirements over and above the land use code. We review the stormwater management, grading, and drainage. Now the borough's got a stormwater control ordinance in place. The DEP issues a stormwater discharge permit to the borough every 5 years, and they require that stormwater code be updated with new requirements. So currently, the stormwater management requirements include stormwater quantity management, stormwater quality management. The newest requirements are green infrastructure being incorporated for the stormwater quality, and in some cases there's a stormwater recharge requirement. So we review the project against all of those in the code. We assess the project for potential environmental impacts, Could there be contamination on the site? And we checked the DEP databases with regard to that and report to the planning board with regard to those issues. We also review the projects for potential traffic impacts. Now basically how they do that is the applicant's engineer will do what's called a trip generation. They assess the potential traffic that would be created by the new development, compare that to what may have pre-existed, and if there's a significant increase, then it moves farther into a traffic assessment, which we would look at the road system, see if there's any particular intersections that need to be looked at to see if the project could potentially impact that. Now, the majority of your redevelopment's happening on North Avenue, which is a DOT roadway, so they basically take jurisdiction along that roadway. South Washington, North Washington is a county road. They take jurisdiction on the traffic on those roads. So if there were a potential for some impacts to local streets, we would get involved in that and try to get, or make sure that the applicant's engineer would look at those impacts. We also look at the site circulation and parking on the site, make sure that the parking is being provided per the code, make sure that refuse vehicles and emergency vehicles can circulate the site. We look at utility impacts. Can the water system accommodate the water requirements for fire flow and for potable water requirements? Can the sewer system take the flows that are going to be generated by the project? And that's all done by the applicant's engineer. He does an assessment, we review that assessment. We look at the landscaping and lighting on the project, make sure the lighting isn't impacting adjacent properties. And we have certified tree experts and landscape architects on staff who look at the landscaping plan. If the project's residential, we review it against the state's residential site improvement standards, which generally supersede your local ordinances. We assess the project to see if there's any need for outside agency approvals, such as land use approvals from the DEP for wetlands or flood hazard. And once that review is done, we basically compile all our comments into a report to the land use board, and we attend the meeting when the applicant is heard. Now, once the project is approved by the planning board, typically they approve it with some conditions, usually comments that are in our report and Dan's planning report. So post-approval, the developer will submit to us revised plans that need to address those conditions. We review those plans, and in the case of subdivisions where they're required, we review the deed descriptions for the subdivision, the maps that will be filed with the county, and ultimately we need to verify that all the conditions of the board have been met. Once they have met all those conditions, we generate a report that goes to the governing body in town, and it establishes the performance guarantees and escrow fee amounts that are required for the project. Once that step is complete, the project is basically ready to go to construction. So the first thing we do is we conduct a pre-construction meeting, invite the local officials, utility companies if they're affected, and basically go through the project and what the requirements are. Prior to starting construction, the contractors that the redeveloper hires will submit to us material submittals and shop drawing submittals that we have to review against the approved plans, make sure that they're in compliance. And then when the construction starts, we have a site observer that visits the site and he observes the construction, make sure everything's going in per plan. During construction, there's almost always some unforeseen conditions. Sometimes there's buried things that come up that affect the construction. So we review those and work with the applicant's engineer during that time to resolve those issues. Once the construction is done, the applicant's engineer prepares as-built plans. They're submitted to our office, and we review those, and they're basically filed with the borough. Also during construction, the construction official needs to issue certificates of occupancy for the buildings. We assist them with that endeavor, do site work inspections, and report to him with regard to any deficiencies or if we're in agreement that the building can be occupied. Once all this is done, basically the redeveloper requests a release of his bonds and his escrows. We make that recommendation to the borough if that's the case and everything's done. And at that point, there's generally a 2-year maintenance guarantee that's posted that guarantees the improvements in case something unforeseen comes up. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Lou. Okay, so next up, well, first I just want to note too, Lou and CME has been also vital in helping the town get millions of dollars in NJDOT grants. For fiscal year 2024 alone, they were able to obtain over $1,025,000 in grants for Dunellen. So thank you for the work you do there as well. Next up, we're going to talk about redevelopment agreements and what they are. And this will be led by Charles Liebling. He is a partner at the law firm of Windell, Marks, Lane, Mittendorf, LLP. He's a resident in their New Brunswick, New Jersey office. He concentrates his practice on redevelopment and redevelopment financing, land use law, and general real estate transactions, and represents both for-profit and nonprofit developers as well as government entities. Chuck has served as Special Redevelopment Counsel to the Borough of Dunellen since 2013. So Chuck, thank you for being here this evening. And you have some of your associates here too. Welcome.
Everyone. So, planner does a redevelopment plan. It's got a vision of what the municipality wants to see happen in an area. And between that and the application for an actual project that Lou described, there's an agreement that's put in place that oversees and governs the process of redevelopment, and that's a redevelopment agreement. I didn't mix. There's nothing more boring than projecting an agreement on the screen, so I didn't bother. So all attention here, please.
You can find them all on the website under the redevelopment and read them there.
There you go. There you go. So what this agreement does, it governs the process of actually getting from somebody coming to the borough and saying, I saw you got a redevelopment plan. I'd like to build something on this site. How do we make that happen? So there's an agreement, and I'm going to use 150 North Avenue as an example. It was an empty lot across from Station Plaza, and now it's almost ready for occupancy. So this was a successful redevelopment agreement, and what's included in it is kind of what if you stop and think about it, you say, what do I want to make sure happens in order to get from the empty lot to an occupied building. And this negotiation process can be brief or lengthy. I think a good indicator is the mayor's timeline showed 2017 for the Art Color redevelopment agreement being signed. He also mentioned that I've been redevelopment counsel since 2013. Well, that's when I started to start working on the Art Color redevelopment agreement, and that's how long it took to get from these initial concepts of a twice failed concept to something that worked. So first thing you do in a redevelopment agreement is describe the project. What is it that you're agreeing to build, Mr. Redeveloper or Ms. Redeveloper? And it happens to be for that one, it's 1,578 square feet of ground floor commercial, 14 residential units, 12 market rate to affordable. And then the other things they need to do, they got to get all their approvals. They have to get their financing. they have to pay the borough costs, which is my fees, Lou's fees, Dan's fees. So that all goes on the redeveloper rather than the borough. Then you agree on a project schedule. When are you going to start? When are you going to finish? And what milestones do you have to hit in between? And what happens if you don't meet those? We've been generally fortunate and successful in Dunellen in terms of people meeting those. Couple cases we haven't, and actions have been taken to either bring in a new redeveloper or extensions where appropriate. So far, I would say that generally speaking, with all these projects, they've all worked pretty smoothly. No big disasters. And then when the project is completed, the borough issues a certification saying you did everything that you were supposed to do, and then they have evidence to present to lenders, purchasers, whoever it might be, that all is good with respect to the redevelopment having been completed. The borough conducts project oversight. There's progress meetings to demonstrate where they are in the process. There's reports that have to be provided to the borough explaining where the developer is in various projects, where there might be delays, what's going to be done to remedy the delays. And the borough is also permitted to go onto the property, inspect it, and just make sure that everything is moving forward as it needs to be. The redeveloper is also obligated not only to build the project, but to build the infrastructure that's necessary to serve the project. There may be an older site that doesn't have adequate water or sewer service, and so that needs to be expanded. Driveways, other traffic mitigating measures, and that's all part of the redevelopment agreement and obligations that the redeveloper has to take on as part of the project. And sometimes those costs are really more than the project can afford, because you always have to be in the mindset that a project's not going to move forward unless it makes sense economically for the redeveloper. And you'll be hearing more about some of those, the financial side of things from my colleagues up here. As I mentioned, requirement to get all other approvals, requirement to get necessary financing, and then you have to come to grips with the fact that most developers are not going to be paying for these out of their pocket. They're going to get outside financing in order to build the project, and you've got to be sensitive to and cognizant of the requirements of the financial institutions when they're making these loans, because they need to protect themselves against a potential failure to pay or other default by a developer. And the borough has to agree to certain flexibility, and then working with that financial institution in identifying replacement developers, allowing for longer periods for things to occur, not holding them to the strict schedule that's been agreed to. And that's just a necessity in terms of making these projects work within the context of commercial financing. If a bank has to foreclose, they get a certain amount of period to find somebody to come in, take over the project. The borough's got to be reasonable in approving a replacement developer and so forth. And then the borough always reserves the rights for itself to pay off the mortgage, acquire the property back, find its own new redeveloper, and that's really all the lender wants. So again, we haven't had to. These are all provisions in these agreements, but fortunately, more often than not, they never come into play. And and we haven't had to deal with that here. If there are environmental issues, the redeveloper agrees that it's going to address them all. It holds the borough harmless with respect to any of that. They agree not to transfer the project to anyone else. We've picked you because we believe you can get the project done. Can't just go out now and shop it and bring somebody else in without the borough approving that. There are soft commitments that they make as well, that they'll supervise the property, that they'll limit impacts on the neighborhoods. They'll do whatever they have to minimize traffic impacts. They'll keep the rats out. They won't create too much noise. And we've had to actually utilize those a couple times to bring redevelopers back into line that maybe were sloppy on the site or were obstructing neighbors' access to their properties and so forth. So those are important as well. Affordable housing, you heard that this project has 2 units in it. The borough is party to a settlement agreement relating to its affordable housing obligation, and that gets built into each of these redevelopment agreements so that those units are included, and all the documentations and restrictions are part of the project. Jessica is going to tell you more about that. They have to carry insurance and name the borough as additional insured in case there's any claims against the borough resulting from the project. And then there's a series of default provisions. You know, they don't comply. They try to build something else. They violate the schedule. They transfer the project to someone else. They go below their, you know, they're no longer financially stable. Borough has its remedies. It can terminate the agreement and seek damages if appropriate. So that's what this agreement does really for the borough. The other piece that was mentioned is community benefit, and that gets built into this agreement as well. For this project, there is a contribution, I think $37,000 towards the cost of a quality pedestrian crossing there, and that is a kind of a give back that the redeveloper provides in exchange for the opportunity that it's been given to do this redevelopment, and also in connection with the pilot that they may receive. And Tan will talk more about pilots, I think, right after me. So that's how these projects. That's where the lawyers appear on the scene is to get these agreements into place, and then once that's there, the developer can then go to the planning board with its plans and, you know, start the actual development process.
Thank you, Chuck. So I'll add to this really quick. I think, as you know, the redevelopment agreement really protects the borough and what the developer could potentially do to us, or it's basically the agreement, as you know, it protects both sides. And I want just to note that what these professionals do too. They're here to represent the borough. They are our professionals. I know sometimes there's a misconception that developers come in, they take advantage of small towns. I'll tell you this, not with these folks. This is a great team, and we fight back. We don't get taken advantage of. It's a great team. So they're here to protect us. The one thing I just want to note too, as these redevelopment agreements are being negotiated, there's a thing called a conditional redevelopment agreement, or it's, what's the other term, the interim cost agreement. And basically what that does is it protects the costs on the town too, so we're not paying the professionals for the expenses that the developer is incurring on the town. But it also allows us the ability to negotiate the redevelopment agreement, the financial agreement, and also come to terms on a conceptual rendering that is felt appropriate to present to council, which is also the redevelopment agency, and then eventually the planning board. So the process usually goes, developer comes, interested in a property, we get into conditional redevelopment agreement, discuss the concept, redevelopment agreement, financial agreement, etc. then it gets presented to council in the sense of a redevelopment agreement, et cetera. So I just wanted to add on to that, but great job, Chuck, thank you. Next up, we get to talk with Tiana Cafoni from McManaman, Scotland and Bauman. She is with that firm. She serves as redevelopment counsel for the borough. They also serve as bond counsel too. Tiana concentrates her practice in redevelopment law, public finance, local government, and land use. She has experience representing municipalities all over the state as redevelopment counsel, general counsel, planning board attorney, and zoning board attorney. Tiana's redevelopment practice encompasses both the financial and planning elements of redevelopment process, from the designation of a redevelopment area and the negotiation of a redevelopment agreement to the negotiation of a financial agreement, government payments in lieu of taxes, and issuance of redevelopment area bonds. So, Tiana, welcome back and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I am going to explain financial agreements, but in order to do that, what are you trying to say?
It's me. IT.
But I have my high heels on today. So in order to do that, I need to kind of take a step back for a minute and kind of frame redevelopment for everybody a little bit. Now, some people will know this, some people may not. And so I'm going to give 2 minutes of why redevelopment, what the purpose is, and that's going to enable everybody to kind of understand where pilots fit in and how they work. So redevelopment. Redevelopment area, when we talk about redevelopment area, these are areas that satisfy certain criteria in a statute that they are, sometimes people use the term blighted. They are faulty arrangement. The buildings are run down. They're no longer good for their purpose. They've been vacant for a long period of time. They're essentially not likely to be developed through normal process. So they're determined, they're special areas, not all over. They're special areas that are designated redevelopment areas. Then there's a plan that is particular just to the redevelopment areas. So, and that governs it's like the land use. It's what you can do, how you can do it, setbacks, all the typical zoning for those areas. And so the intent of redevelopment is to attract development to those areas. So it is, let's call it troubled areas that you want to attract development to. Troubled meaning maybe it's going to cost more money for a developer to develop there for whatever reason. And so it's, okay, it's going to cost more money. Listen, developers need to make money they're not going to come and develop property unless they're going to make money, right? So it's going to cost them more money. And so it's the purpose of redevelopment is to attract developers to areas where they wouldn't normally come and develop for whatever reason. And so there's a couple tools that we have to do that with redevelopment. And one of them is the redevelopment plan, because we're now zoning particular to that area. So perhaps there's greater density that they get than otherwise would in the rest of the municipality. And another tool, the big tool, is pilots. So that a pilot is a tax exemption with a twist. It's a tax exemption with a payment in lieu of taxes. So it's not that they pay nothing. They do pay something, but it is a tax exemption, and it's helpful to the municipality, and it's helpful to the redeveloper. And it's helpful to the redeveloper, I'll explain first, because it provides them with a known amount that they are going to pay, that they can budget, that they can show their lenders, and that they can forecast for the future, for construction, so they can use that in their financials And it helps them with budgeting. And it also is almost always less than what they would otherwise pay. Now, not less than what the property is paying right now, right? So not less than what the taxes are on the property now, less than what they would pay on the finished project for a period of time. The benefit up to the borough is that you get a project, right? Because the entire premise of a pilot is, but for the tax exemption, the financials don't make sense. So now you see why I had to go back and explain redevelopment to begin with, right? So, but for the pilot, redevelopment wouldn't happen. The project wouldn't happen because the redeveloper isn't gonna make the profit margin that it needs to. And Dan reviews this on behalf of the municipality. We have, and as part of a pilot analysis, we do all these calculations and we know, yeah, that's true. It is true. They would not make a reasonable profit on this project if it weren't for getting this tax exemption and paying whatever percentage Dan negotiates. They won't make enough money to do the project. And in the end, we want them to be successful. We want the project to be a success. We don't want anyone constructing something, or even worse, starting to construct something in the municipality and failing. So we want a success. So the project needs the tax exemption in order to be successful. And that's part of what brings the redeveloper to this redevelopment area to build. That's one of the incentives. So I've completely ignored my slides. What is a pilot? Okay, so I wanted to frame it because it's hard to understand pilots if you don't understand redevelopment and all the pieces and all the incentives and how it all works together, because otherwise it doesn't make sense why you would grant a tax exemption. And the reason you're granting a tax exemption is to draw redevelopers in and also to help the financials of the project work. Otherwise, and that's actually statutory. You cannot grant a pilot unless they satisfy what's known as the but-for test. But for the tax exemption, they could not afford to do the project. The financials don't make sense. So a pilot it stands for payment in lieu of taxes. It's when a municipality grants a tax exemption for a project and the project pays, and it's called an annual service charge. So it's not taxes, it's payment in lieu of taxes. It's an amount that's agreed upon. It's based on a statutory formula that is agreed upon between the municipality and the redeveloper. And it is an amount, again, that they know in advance how much it's going to be. They can budget it, they can show lenders, they know it's a fixed amount. It's a fixed percentage, not always a fixed dollar amount. But it's, and it's certainly less than they would otherwise pay on the finished project. But it is more than what the municipality is getting currently on the property. Annual service charge replaces conventional taxes on the improvements, and sometimes replaces, for residential, will replace the taxes on the property as well. And this last bullet, but for the annual service charge, the redevelopment project would not be built as designed by the redeveloper and approved by the municipality. Again, there's that but-for test. It's just the financials wouldn't make sense because of whatever condition on this property resulted in it being designated as a redevelopment area. That's why those costs are now being realized by the redeveloper, whatever it may be. That's now the reason that the redeveloper is now expending all those funds as part of the project and now needs this tax exemption to make the project work. Okay, the process. So it's nice bullets here. It doesn't always happen this way, but all of these steps have to happen at one point or another. Typically, you start with for the pilot portion of the process, usually you start with a project, right? You want to have a project. You want to make sure the municipality likes the project. You want to make sure that the municipality, likes the density and it complies with the redevelopment plan and all that. So you usually are going along the path with the redevelopment agreement first, but at the same time you're dealing with the pilot, and usually you have the redeveloper submit their pro forma, their financials. Okay, before we get too far along in this process, we want to make sure that you guys can afford to do the project. We want to make sure that in the end, a couple things. One, that your numbers support the fact that you can have a tax exemption, that the pilot is, that but-for test is satisfied. And sometimes even, we want to make sure that even with the tax exemption, that you make enough money that we're confident that you'll be successful with your project, right? We don't want any failing projects. And sometimes Dan even says, wait a minute, this doesn't look good for them. So we actually look at it that way too, because again, we don't want a failed project and borrow either. That doesn't help anybody. So we oftentimes start with the financials. That's the big thing when it comes to the pilot. There's an application that's statutory that they need to submit. That's part of it. It gives us a lot of the information. Quite frankly, a lot of the times, by the time they submit that, we know a lot of it, but it's required. It's required to be reviewed by the mayor. He needs to approve it as part of the process. The financial agreement is the end result of all of that. It sets forth the amount of the pilot, the term of the long-term tax exemption, which is a maximum of 30 years. So it sets forth the annual service charge. It talks about transfer provisions. There's certain restrictions on transfers. There's certain restrictions for urban renewal entities. That's the type of entity that can enter into financial agreements. Look, I'm ahead of myself. Limitation on profit for the URE, exemption of improvements in residential projects, requirement that URE submit annual audits. So there's certain requirements of the urban renewal entity that goes into the financial agreement. There's an administrative fee that the municipality can charge. That's in the statute. That is annual. Okay, so the annual service charge. At least 10% of annual gross revenue or 2% of total project cost. That's typical. Increase in stages as percentage of otherwise applicable taxes. Those are the calculations. It's all set forth in the statute. Quite frankly, if you're ever going to have to do it or look through it, you're going to have to go through the statute. It's a little more detailed than that. Big part of it. So this is where one of those benefits to the municipality for a pilot. So typically, a municipality has to share its taxes with the county, the school, and then the municipality gets some. So for pilot, 95% of the annual service charge that it collects, it gets to keep, and 5% goes to the county. So it is keeping a much higher percentage of what it collects. Maximum term is 30 years from completion, or 35 years from the execution of the financial agreement, 50 years if it's 2 or more sequential projects being undertaken in phases. Okay, I already went through all that part. Okay, 5-year tax exemption. I'll go through this quickly. The mayor touched on this. This is a different statute. First one was long-term tax exemption law. This is the 5-year tax abatement and exemption law. This is a very convoluted statute for what should be a very simple process. This is a exemption for small projects, for existing property owners. Again, same premise, right? Encouraging people to make improvements to their property. That's the whole basis for the 5-year exemption. So if you want to put on an addition or make an improvement to your property, you could do that, and you don't have to pay for a period of time the increase in your assessment. So let me back up for a second. You do an improvement to your property, presumably, it could increase the value of your property, which then results in additional taxes that you pay. Well, the 5-year exemption means you could do that improvement to your property, but you don't have to pay that addition. Now, there's some calculations and some limitations on that, but that's essentially the basis for it. So it encourages business owners, property owners to do those improvements because it allows them to, and at a crucial time, right? So you do that improvement, you spend all that money on that project, and then for the next 5 years, you get a break on not your taxes. It's not like you then don't pay taxes for 5 years. You're still paying the same taxes you always did. You're just not paying an increase based on what the project that you just completed. So you get a little bit of a break after just spending all that money on the project. So it's, again, encouraging redevelopment, it's encouraging projects. Let's see if I covered all that. There we go, see? Okay, building. Encourages residents to renovate, remodel, even build. Yes, it applies to new construction as well. Here's an important thing to know, for 5-year exemptions, there are certain types that are simple applications that you make to the tax assessor and are approved just as a matter of course, and you apply after you finish the improvements. And then there are some that you have to apply before you do the improvements, and you actually enter into a tax agreement that's approved by the municipality. So it's important to check with the municipality beforehand and figure out what type of improvement yours is and when you have to apply and how that's all structured. And that's true. This does not negatively impact the municipality because, again, the taxes you've always paid are the same. So they're not reducing anybody's taxes. Same with long-term tax exemption law. No one's paying less than what was already being paid. No one's getting less than what was already being paid. It's just there's no increase based on these projects. There's no increase. That's everything I have.
Thank you, Joanna. Next up, we have Jessica Almeida. She's an associate at McManaman, Scotland and Bauman. Following her graduation from law school, she clerked for the New Jersey Supreme Court. She has extensive experience in affordable housing matters, including briefing and arguing affordable housing matters before the Superior Court, Appellate Division, and Supreme Court. She also took in 2 of the state's affordable housing trials. So, Jessica, welcome, and she's going to discuss affordable housing.
Put that down. I'm still not a scholarship, and I don't wear heels. So when I was a new lawyer, I was assigned to a partner who did affordable housing, and I walked in with my notebook, and I was like, "Can you just explain this to me?" And he just laughed. It is a very complicated topic, so I'm going to try and give you a high-level overview of affordable housing, what it means and what it means in Dunellen. So the affordable housing doctrine, it's called the Mayoral doctrine. And it's named after a municipality in South Jersey. In early 1970s, they brought a lawsuit against the township of Mayoral because what was happening was there was a historically black neighborhood where there were many individuals who were living there in substandard housing for the most part. And the town decided that that's not what they wanted anymore, and they forced everybody out. These people who've been living there for generations had nowhere to go. And they built mini mansions, basically excluding that segment of the population from living in Mayoral. The NAACP got involved, as well as many different stakeholders in the state of New Jersey, and they brought this lawsuit. And what it is actually, it's a civil rights doctrine. It's based on the New Jersey State Constitution, which basically means that everybody has the right to live in every municipality. And from that thought, the Mayoral doctrine, which is the affordable housing doctrine, was built. As part of the there's been 5 Mayorals now. The most recent one was in 2017. But the one that we operate now is mostly Mayoral 4. So as many people might know, as a result of the Mayoral decisions, the state of New Jersey adopted the Fair Housing Act, and as part of the Fair Housing Act, the state of New Jersey was to form the Council on Affordable Housing, which we all know as COA. Well, COA is pretty much defunct because through a series of administrations, they never appointed anybody to sit on the COA board. And the COA board's main purpose was to develop the rules to help municipalities decide how many affordable units they needed in each of their municipalities. COA tried to develop their ground rules, except they didn't really make a lot of sense, and there were a lot of issues and a lot of problems with them. So the New Jersey Appellate Division and the New Jersey Supreme Court said, these aren't gonna work. This goes against what the Mayoral doctrine is. And they invalidated those rules. And so there, for a long period of time, we call it the gap years, no municipality got an obligation. And some municipalities took it upon themselves to create affordable housing and to keep up with their obligations, but the majority of the state of New Jersey did not do that. And to no one's fault, because there was no rules, there was no goal for everybody to meet, and it sat out there for about 17 years, I think, until the judiciary in 2014, the New Jersey Supreme Court said, listen guys, this is out of control. We have all of these municipalities which just haven't been producing affordable housing, and we have to do something. And obviously COA is not doing it because there is no COA. So now it's time for the courts to take control of this. So the courts issued a decision in 2014, which we call Mayoral 4, which said every municipality has to, by July 5th, 2015, file what's known as a declaratory judgment lawsuit. A declaratory judgment lawsuit is a fancy word for saying, we did what we were supposed to do, can you just, check mark that we've done it. So most municipalities, and Dunellen was one of the very first, the first municipality in Middlesex County to file their declaratory judgment lawsuit. And what they have to do there is say, listen, we have a plan. We know what we want to do. This is how we're going to achieve our affordable housing goals in our municipality. And I think, yes, Dunellen settlement with, so Fair Share Housing Center, which you guys may or may not have heard if you know anything or pay attention to affordable housing, is the court-approved intervener. They're like the affordable housing police. And they're very good at what they do. They come into every single declaratory judgment action, and they make sure that the plans make sense. They make sure that there's affordable housing going into every area of the state. And they'll look at the plans that a municipality brings in and say, you guys are not, you're never going to tear down a mega mansion and put affordable housing there. That they'll look at the plans, make judgment calls, and work with the municipalities, work with the court-appointed planners, put together something that's realistic and works for everybody. And after that's done, you go before the judge, present your plan, and the court approved Dunellen's plan in May of 2016. So the Fair Share Housing Settlement found that Dunellen had an obligation to build 118 units available to very low, and moderate income individuals and families. So if you step that back just really quick, there's 3 types of affordable units in any project that somebody builds: very low, and moderate income. Moderate income units mean, so the median income for Dunellen is currently about, I think it's close to $100,000. If you make $80,000, I'm just using round numbers, it's a little different, but if you make $80,000, you're making below the median income. But that $80,000 entitles you to be eligible for a moderate income unit. So think about that. $80,000 is moderate income in the Middlesex County area. And that would give somebody the right to purchase or to rent or be eligible for an affordable unit. Very low is making under 50% of the median income. So you're making less than $50,000. And then very low means you're making less than 30% of the median income for the area. So of those 118 units that the borough agreed when they settled with Fair Share, 60 of those units plus 5 bonus units. It's really confusing, but bonus units are awarded if you have a rental unit. You only get so many bonus units, so if you have a rental unit, you can use some of those because rentals turn over quicker than for sale units. So they give you a bump, a bonus for that. Those were contained in 2 of the big inclusionary developments, which the mayor spoke about earlier tonight.
So those remaining 53 units, the town said, well, you know what? We're gonna provide a realistic opportunity for affordable housing in Dunellen, and they rezoned the parts of the downtown area to have what's called a mandatory set-aside, which means if you build something in Dunellen, in the redevelopment area, you must have a 15% of those units have to be deemed for affordable housing. I think I already did this. Yeah. So who builds these units? Because when you say affordable housing, the borough cannot build 118 units of affordable housing. The onus is on the developers to build them. And the developers come, they look at the redevelopment plans, they look at what is available in the redevelopment areas, and they come to the the borough and they say, well, this is what I want to do, and this is how it's going to help the borough. This is why you should enter into a redevelopment agreement with Dunellen and with the developer, and they provide those units. And most of the time, they also manage those units. And those income levels that I talked about just a few minutes ago, every year, the people living in the rental units have to certify to the management agent, which is paid for by the developer, that they still only make that amount, that they're still below 80, or still below 50, or still below 30% of the income. Because if you hit 81, you're not eligible anymore. You can't live in that moderate income unit. And what it is it's a stepping stone, it's supposed to be. So that eventually, when you start making more money, you go and you live in a market rate unit, or you've bought a house, or you're no longer eligible, and somebody else, some other person can take that unit. So I have here, in exchange for those affordable units, which the developer takes a loss on those affordable units, and that's sometimes why they'll request a pilot to help offset those costs. So here's just an example to help use the math that I put. A developer wants to build a project with 50 units. 15% of those 50 units, will mean that 8 of those units have to be affordable units. And then there's a breakdown, which the planners usually help with, and I'll Dan a lot, so I have another rent to run money. 13% have to be available to very low income, 37% to, very low income is 13%, 37% to low, and 50% to moderate income. And then the third party administrator will be the one who checks your income to make sure you're eligible to live there. So here's the big thing, like, what happens if you don't build those units? And it's not a good thing. I've been involved in some of those lawsuits. Basically, the court comes along and says, well, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, so now you have lost the ability to do anything. Your hands are now tied. The redeveloper will come in, do what they want to do. As long as it's good planning, they have the ability to build without worrying about setbacks, which is how far your building is off the yard, how much density. They don't have to do community give-backs. They don't have to do any of those things. They can build whatever they want, and under Mayoral 2, as long as it's good planning, they can do it. So that's why it's very important for Dunellen and all municipalities to have filed that declaratory judgment action and to keep following up and making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing under the settlement with fair share housing, because you don't want to lose your zoning. You don't want to lose the ability to make decisions about what goes on in your town and where things go in your town. And this has happened to other municipalities in Middlesex County, and it has not been good for them. They have had a lot of change in a very short period of time, where Dunellen has been actively working with the community and the redevelopers to phase these things in and to do it in a smart way, where it's not going to cause a huge disruption in Dunellen. And how is Dunellen doing? So the court under Mayoral 4 required everybody to do a midpoint review, which is the halfway point in the rounds. That's what the affordable housing lingo is for 10 years. And in 2020, Dunellen filed their midpoint review. And since then, they've entered into negotiations for an additional 13 units, and I think there's a few more that are in the pipeline coming down, I think another 12. And if those units are rentals, then you get those bonus units. So it's not actually 118 units. You actually get credit for 25% of them if they're rentals. So it's under 100. And that's all I got for you.
Okay, we're getting close to my favorite town hall during the year because it is a little bit lengthy, but it's a very important topic and we go into a lot of in-depth. It's important to understand the redevelopment process and how it happens in Dunellen and where we were, where we are, and where we plan to go. So next up is a discussion on financial impact of new developments and resident and student impact, which I know is a big topic amongst our residents. This will be led by Daniel Banker. He's a Senior Vice President of NW Financial Group. He has a bachelor's degree in Business Administration with a concentration in Finance from North Carolina State University. He has personally worked with over 25 municipalities across the state on close to 100 redevelopment projects, which include residential, both market rate and affordable, industrial and commercial developments. This represents over 10,000 residential units, 9 million square feet of industrial and commercial space, and investments into municipalities of approximately $6.3 billion. I will just note right before Dan comes up, we are going to talk about the school-age impact, student impact, and we have a great communication with the school district before any project is finalized and negotiated, and we discuss it with the school, and when the agreements are signed, we send those numbers to the schools so they're aware of what the impact could potentially be. And they know between a project when it's agreed upon and approved to when construction, there's about 12 to 18-month process to prepare for that. So Dan's going to get into that, but I just wanted to kind of preface it with that comment. So, and Dan's been great in these communications with the school district. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Daniel Banker. I work with NW Financial Group. Just to give a little background, NW has been around since 1996. We are a municipal financial underwriting and advisory firm. As the mayor stated, not only do we not work for developers in Dunellen, NW Financial strictly works on the public side. We do not work for developers at all. I've been at NW for approximately 6 years, and actually when I was preparing the numbers for that bio, I was surprised myself at how many projects I had worked on over the last 6 years. But over the last several years, NW Financial has been involved in the review of several redevelopment projects. And that process includes reviewing a developer's pro forma, first reviewing the developer's capability as to whether or not the developer is capable of building that project. Then in terms of reviewing the developer pro forma, we're looking at estimated project costs, we're looking at expected revenues and expenses, sources of funding, financing assumptions, interest rates, affordability requirements, parking requirements, and of course the requested pilot term. So tonight I'm going to go through a recent redevelopment project that was approved. I believe it was approved in September of 2022. However, we started reviewing this project early 2022. So I will note as I go through that these numbers were projections at that time, and I will identify what has changed over the last 2 years as I go through the presentation. So this is 120 to 126 North Avenue, 3 individual sites that will eventually be combined. It was approved for 33 units, 5 of which are affordable. It will also include approximately 2,200 square feet of commercial space, 35 parking spaces, and it was estimated to cost approximately $8.2 million. And just be prepared, there's going to be a lot of numbers. I'm a numbers guy, so this presentation has a ton of tables and charts. So this is the projected unit mix of both the market rate and affordable components. So you'll see the majority of the market rate component is comprised of 1 and 2 bedroom units. And then the affordable unit mix, it goes along with COA standards. Basically, the affordable units, you can have no more than 20% studios and 1s, no less than 20% 3s, and the remaining can be scattered, but typically they put them in the 2-bedroom category. So what you'll see here that I want to mention is, as I stated, these were the projections at the time when we reviewed the project, financials, and we're in the process of negotiating a pilot. So you'll see, for example, the rents. 1 bedroom's at $1,640, 2 bedrooms at $2,400, 43, 3 bedrooms at 2,400. At that time, this is pre the Nell, the rental component of the Art Colors site. So it was unclear as to what rents would be for new development in Dunellen. As we know now, the Nell is doing very, very well. The last I heard, I believe there were 8 units vacant out of the 252 total. So we have a better sense of what rents are at the Nell. Over the last 2 years, rents have significantly increased. So that's good for the developer. It's also good for the municipality because the pilot is based on a percentage of gross revenue. But on the same side, in that same time, construction costs, material, and labor have increased dramatically. And interest rates at this time were 4.5%. Now construction interest rates are 7, 8, 9%. So it has somewhat balanced out. And I would even say that a project that was built 2 years ago would be in better shape than a project built today. So it is still a difficult time to redevelop, but fortunately we are seeing redevelopment all over the state continue to grow. So this is the sources and uses. So for a project at $8.2 million, the amount of equity in this project at that time would have been approximately $1.7 million. The other 80% would be coming from a bank or a private lender. And you'll see, this is also an interesting table to look at now that I've reviewed several projects recently. You'll see the breakdown of project costs. The building hard cost number of $160,000 per unit and $160 per square foot. That number now is more like $210 or $210,000 per unit and closer to $200 per square foot. Just to give you a sense of how much project costs have increased over the last 2 or so years. And you'll see that includes land acquisition, soft costs. Another line item that has significantly increased is the financing cost line item. There you're at $13,000 per unit. That was based on a 4.5% interest rate. Now at 7, 8, 9%, that number will double, if not, if not be more than that. So this is a basic summary of where the pilot negotiations ended up. As Tiana was mentioning about the financial agreement, part of the financial agreement is calculating the annual service charge. So typically a developer asks for the best case scenario terms, the longest pilot for 30 years, and the minimum percentage of gross revenue at 10%. After negotiations and going through our analysis, we determined that the first 10 years were appropriate to be at 10%, but in years 16 through 20, that percentage would increase from 10 to 12%. To give a sense, as we mentioned, although the developer is paying less than they would if the project was fully taxed, as a comparison to what the lot is currently generating, it's a significant increase. These 3 lots, as of 2023, we're paying a total of $41,405, of which the borough receives 26%, or $10,812. Based on the projections at that time, the gross pilot at a 10% rate, once the building is fully occupied, because a pilot is based on actual revenue received. So there's always a lease-up period. So the first year, depending on the size of the building, while it's leasing up, the revenue is lower. But for this project, we're assuming that the building will be fully leased up by year 2. So the gross pilot at 10% would be approximately $73,000, or sorry, $75,000, of which the borough share would be $73,000. So the borough share goes from $10,800 to $73,000, and that number just goes up as rent increases. Over the 30-year term, the borough is estimated to receive approximately $3.4 million. One of the analyses we do is if the property remained undeveloped and continued paying the taxes that it's currently paying, assuming a 2% annual increase every year, over that 30-year period, the borough share of the taxes would be $438,000. So from this pilot, the borough share is increasing by $2.95 million. As the mayor mentioned, there is a community benefit payment associated to this project. They will be making a $50,000 contribution, which will be used towards pedestrian safety. I believe there's also a payment in lieu of parking on this deal, where they are making a $10,000 per unit payment for 5 spaces. Sorry, $10,000 per space contribution, and I think it's for 5 spaces, so that will be an additional $50,000 payment. Okay, so this is a slide that shows the comparison. So before we even consider a pilot, as mentioned earlier, there's something called the but-for test. The but-for test is, before you can even consider a pilot, you need to look at the project under a conventional tax scenario. Is this project financially feasible if it paid conventional taxes? So to do that, we worked with the tax assessor to get a sense of where conventional taxes would be for this type of project. In this case, the assessor gave her input, and it would be $195,000. So you'll see annual gross revenue of $750,000, operating expenses of $185,000, property taxes of $195,000. You get a net operating income of approximately $370,000. Based on that NOI, a value is calculated, and that's using a cap rate. I believe in this case it's 5.5%. So the value of the project at that point would be $6.7 million. Again, the estimated project cost was $8.2 million. So in this case, you have a net negative project value of $1.5 million, meaning the developer would be building a project for $8.2 million that is only worth $6.8. Typically, a developer is not willing to do that deal. So that's the first notice for us that says this project may not be financially feasible. We also look at 2 other return metrics, one of which is the IRR, which stands for internal rate of return. This accounts for the amount of equity, in this case 20%, and assumes a sale at the end of 10 years. That rate of return, the average rate during that 10-year period, is the IRR percentage shown here. The typical market return is somewhere between 11 and 14% for IRR. Here you see under conventional taxes it's 2.25. Again, well below the threshold. Lastly, yield on cost, which is the NOI divided by the total project cost, that $8.2 million number. A typical market return is somewhere between 6 and 7. Here you have 4.5%. So those 3 metrics tell us that the project is most likely not financially feasible under conventional taxes. Lastly, and probably most importantly, even if a developer was willing to do a project at the lower returns like this, they need to get financing. They need to get money. The debt service coverage ratio is the metric that banks use to determine, can a project afford the annual debt service payment to pay back the money that they've lent. So today, banks are only lending typically to projects that produce a 1.2 coverage ratio, meaning their cash flow has to represent 120% of the annual debt service number. So if the debt service is $100,000 a year, the cash flow must be $120,000 or more, or else that bank's not lending you money. So for all those reasons, it proves that this project is unlikely to move forward under conventional taxes. So now that we've established that, we take a look at the second table. All of these items are the same on the top row. The only change you'll see is the property tax number goes from 194 and it drops down to 76 and change. What that does, it increases the net operating income of the property, of the project, resulting in a higher project value. And now you have a positive project value of $650,000. Your IRR has increased to in between the range that we're looking for. The yield on cost is still on the low end, but the low end of acceptable. And your debt service coverage ratio gets you to 1.21. So this is a project that works financially, and it's always a balancing act when you get to the negotiation table, because you want a project that is successful, but you also want to benefit the municipality as much as possible. So there is a lot of back and forth between us, the borough, the developer, and typically, if it goes well, we feel like it's a fair deal for all. A lot of numbers here, but this is a projection of the pilot over the 30-year term. You'll see in year 2, so year 1, you'll see the first green column, that's the gross pilot projection. That number is 38,740 because it's reduced from year 2 and subsequent years because that's the lease-up period. I think we're assuming 50% occupancy in year 1. You'll see that that number continues to bump up every year because we're assuming an annual rent increase of 2%. That is just a projection. If it goes up 5%, it's even better for the municipality. And then in year 16, the percentage of gross revenue bumps up to 12%. So you get a nice little bump there in year 16. And again, 95% of the gross pilot goes to the municipality, while 5% goes to the county. And in addition, 100% of that 2% admin fee goes to the municipality. This is just another table showing what I spoke to earlier regarding existing taxes versus the pilot over the 30-year term. If the project remained undeveloped, the borough share would be approximately $440,000 versus $3.4 million with the pilot. So that is the first part of the analysis. The second part of the analysis is to determine how many new residents and new school children will be generated by a particular project. What we have used is a study from the Blaustein School known as Who Lives in New Jersey Housing. And this study, she can probably explain it better than I can, but we have used this study. They have reviewed, I believe, hundreds of thousands of units across the state of New Jersey, both rental, condo, new, old, large, small, and looked at individual bedroom types, studios, 1s, 2s, 3s. And based on their research, they've identified demographic multipliers that you can apply to a particular bedroom count within a particular type of building to project out the number of new residents and the number of new school children for that building. So we've used that data on this project, and you'll see that based on those multipliers, the number of new people projected, new residents, is 69, and the number of new public school children projected is 7. You'll see, as a comparison to the existing population, that would be an increase of a little under 1%, and we received the actual enrollment numbers as of October 15, 2023 from the Board of Education of 1,343. The 7 additional students would result in about 0.5% increase. So now that we've identified the number of new residents and the number of new public school children that we project to come into the municipality, we now have to identify the cost of those new residents and new school children. The Division of Local Government Services created what's known as the PFAF model, the Pilot Financial Agreement Forecast model, which takes certain line items from the budget and applies a percentage that would be impacted by the increase or decrease in the population. So here you'll see those budgeted line items total $6.2 million. I think this information comes from the most recent budget. And when applying those percentages, this is saying that each additional resident costs the municipality $130. Next, you have the cost of public school children, and this is a debate that can go on for a very long time. However, we have taken the approach, so the user-friendly budget has per pupil budgetary amounts. In 2023-2024, that number was the top number, the $18,543. It is our opinion that adding one additional student, for example, does not require a new teacher, a new principal, a new classroom. There are very incremental costs associated to that individual student. So that rather than using the total budgetary comparative, we're using the total classroom instruction, which was $10,013. In addition, it has come to our attention that we need to consider what capital improvements may be necessary for the additional students that are generated by this project and many others. I believe it was part of Dan's re-exam of the master plan that one of his recommendations was to update the long-range facility plan to see what the status of the schools are, what the capacity needs are, if any. So it's difficult to say what capital improvement needs are there right now. But for purposes of our calculation for this project, we've included the classroom instruction line item and the total operations and maintenance of plant line item. So that comes out to $12,280. So that amount, the school's budget doesn't all come from local sources. 42% roughly comes from local sources. The rest comes from the state, the federal government, and some other sources. So if we take that total cost per student and apply the 42% that comes from local sources, this is resulting in a net cost per student of roughly $5,200. This is just a sum of the new residents and new school children and their costs, so it comes out to a total new cost of approximately $45,000 per year. And then we take a look at the net benefit. So we do this for every project to determine if there's a truly financial benefit from this redevelopment. So you'll see the borough share of the pilot, and we'll use year 2 when it's stabilized, is $73,000 roughly. The resident cost is approximately $9,000. The school cost is approximately $36,000. So you have that $45,000 number. So in year 2, it's expected that this project will still have a net benefit after resident and school costs of $27,000 and change. That number increases as rents increase and as the percentage increases later on in the term. Now we'll take a look at Dunellen as a whole. So this is one of the things that we put together was applying the multipliers from the Rutgers study to all of the active, approved, and proposed developments in the borough. So you'll see the first 2 are in fact active. That's the Crossings, the townhouse development, and Dunellen, the rental component. There's 130 townhouse units and 252 rental units. Based on the Rutgers study, they are projecting to have 33 approximately students from the townhouse component and 27 and a half students in the rental component. Later on in the presentation, we actually have the real data, the actual school children coming out of those 2 developments to compare to those numbers, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. As you go down, you have some smaller projects, but across the, I believe there's 10 projects, yes, 10 projects. It's estimated that the total new school children will be about 110. And I will mention that it is a requirement to have the affordable units, and you'll see there's a reason why we broke out the market rate from the affordable. So about 30% of the projected school children are coming from the affordable units, but you have to build the affordable units. So that's just something that I wanted to do. So this is the actual data compared to the projections from the Rutgers study. We worked, as the mayor mentioned, we have an open line of communication with the Board of Education, and we received data on October 12th of this year. At that time, PRISM, and we also reached out to the developer of Dunellen. They stated that they were 97% occupied, and I was right, eight units were vacant at that time. The projection was for 27 and a half students. Believe it or not, the actual enrollment was 27. So the study was pretty much dead on. In terms of the crossings, it was projected that there would be 33 public school children. Now, as of that date as well, the number of units that had sold at the crossings was 90, so 69% of the units were sold. I have an updated number as we receive new deeds every month because we have to calculate the pilot. As of the end of November, 107 of the 130 were sold. So there's only 23 left. And the sales prices are getting higher and higher. So that's a good thing in terms of pilot revenue for the municipality. But as of the time when 90 units were sold, there were only 5 students. Now, there may be some people that had just purchased and had not enrolled their children in the school system yet. So I would imagine that number will go up, but it does seem likely that it will not reach the 33 student projection. I thought I skipped a slide. Oh, I did skip a slide, sorry. This ties into what I was just talking about. There's always questions as to, is the Rutgers study accurate? How could a project with 250 units only produce so-and-so public school children? So what we did is we pulled some of the recent developments that we worked on that have been fully built, that have been fully occupied, and compared the actual numbers of school children coming out of those buildings to the projections from the study. And I believe there are 9 cases here. In all but one, the actual number came out below the projection. And in the one case, which is the 3rd line, Meridian Lifestyles, it was projecting 11 and the actual school children was 12. So across these 9 buildings, it was projecting 69, the actual number was 39. That's just to give you a sense of the accuracy of the study. I'd say, if anything, they are being conservative with their public school children number. And lastly, at the beginning of the presentation, the mayor talked about the total dollar amount invested into the borough. This is just confirmation of that. If you take the total project cost of those 10 developments, you'll see it's $168 million and change. So there's some significant redevelopment happening in the borough, and we love working here, so that's
all. Next up, we have the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy, Spring of 2024 Graduate Studio, right? Got that right? Led by Dr. David Listikin, who has become a great friend to Dunellen, and we should note is the author and leader of the study that was Who Lives in New Jersey Housing, in which the entire state uses a formula. So we're very fortunate that he's here with us this night. He's led many study classes with the Dunellen, and so tonight's presentation is going to be led by Leah Emmerich and James Barnett. They're 2nd year City and Regional Planning Master's students studying housing and redevelopment. Studio focused on the National Main Street program and its potential application to Dunellen. So this next final half of the presentations are going to be about how do we look at the future of Dunellen and maybe the programs we can implement. So welcome aboard and come on up and make your presentation.
See, professors can't be quiet. That's true. This is a studio in a Masters of Urban Planning program at the Blaustein School. There were 10 student members. We're just giving you really some key highlights, and actually Monday we're presenting to the mayor and council.
Okay. Thank you everyone for having us here tonight, and thank you Mayor especially. So this project is a culmination of all of our work over the semester. Everyone is sitting right there, so give them a round of applause as well. Okay. So we're going to be talking about the New Jersey Main Street program and its applications to Dunellen's future downtown. So first of all, we'll start by talking about the National and New Jersey Main Street programs, a little bit of a background on both of those. The National Main Street Program is part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It was created in 1980 to catalyze downtown economic development and historic preservation. It is still a subsidiary of the National Trust today. More than 2,000 communities have cumulatively participated in that time from 1980 to present day. And it has raised over $100 billion in investment across the country. So Main Street New Jersey is a coordinating program of the national program. It was established in 1989 to support downtown revitalization efforts in the state of New Jersey specifically. It is today administered by the DCA, Department of Community Affairs, and it has realized significant economic benefits by all Main Street communities that are participating. So, there are 25 Main Street programs across the state, as you can see in that map there. There were 18 programs that were established after 2000, so all within the past, 25 years, a lot of the programs have kind of popped up. 16 of these programs coexist with the Business Improvement District or Special Improvement District, and that's also kind of the same thing as a Downtown Improvement District, as the mayor mentioned earlier. So programs can additionally realize funding in addition to the bid or the SID or the DID through municipal donations, fundraising, and transformation grants from the DCA that are awarded to Main Street programs. So some of the actual numbers from 2022 in reinvestment benefits. The program in all of its communities generated 1,018 full and part-time jobs, 179 new businesses, 31 million in public-private investment, 78 construction rehabilitation projects of historic buildings, 12 public improvement projects, and over 16,000 volunteer hours that were contributed. So we also did conduct a survey of all, I shouldn't say all of the programs, but we did offer the survey to all the programs and got 9 responses across the state. So we did ask them a series of questions, kind of mimicking what the national program does for their trend survey to all the programs across the nation, but some takeaways that we got from that were that the majority of the MSNJ programs are 501c3 nonprofits. That's actually to be a district management organization, which is typically the structure of what carries out the Main Street program functions for a town. It has to be a 501c3. So that is why the majority of them are labeled as such. A third of the programs had budgets beneath $100,000. Bids, grants, and state funding were the most common funding sources, as I kind of talked a little bit about earlier. We heard from the programs that social media has been the best way to market activities and programs that each Main Street program puts on, and hosting events and supporting businesses were the most common successes that programs would recite. So, and then murals were also the most common form of public art and placemaking, which is one of the activities that that the Main Street program carries out. So we did 3 in-depth case studies of Main Street communities, one in Metuchen, one in Boonton, and one in Red Bank. For today's purposes, we will just talk about Metuchen since it is close by in Middlesex County, and a lot of people probably know a lot about that community in particular. So for Metuchen, just to provide a little bit of background, there's about 15,000 residents, so it is a little bit bigger than Dunellen. Median household income is around $141,000, so again, a little bit higher than Dunellen, but still within the range. In Middlesex County also, and also has a train station on the Northeast Corridor line of the MJ Transit system. The Main Street program is pretty recently established in 2016, so it is a newer program in the grand scheme of things. And it was a 2023 recipient of the Great American Main Street Award, which is through the national program. So they have done some pretty good efforts there, and it's a great program to highlight for this. So more about Metuchen Downtown Alliance, which is the actual, as I said earlier, the district management organization that oversees all the Main Street program activities. They do have a full-time executive director, and the rest of the operation is supported by volunteers.
Their annual budget is a little bit higher than the average for New Jersey Main Street programs at $372,000, and $250,000 of that is contributed through the SID that is in place in Metuchen. Activities and improvements are funded through the SID that I just mentioned. And just in general, they decided to form the Main Street program to address increasing vacancy rates and a deteriorating downtown. So here's just some highlights of the revitalization efforts that Metuchen has put in. For placemaking, there is some more foot traffic as far as road safety and placemaking efforts downtown. Small business support, they've put on a lot of events for that, as well as family-friendly events that bring the community together within the downtown district. Another aspect of the Main Street program is that it does bring redevelopment. So this is just an example of something that's happened in Metuchen within the downtown district. So we have the Woodmont Metro, Metuchen Station, which was constructed in 2016. And it has 300 housing units with retail, so it's a mixed-use building. Used to be a commuter parking lot for the train station, and 15% of that housing is affordable. And they also created a public space with that. Some successes and challenges that Metuchen has had for their Main Street program. We'll go through the successes first. Economic enhancements have been pretty great. There's been 144 new jobs, 104 buildings rehabilitated, and $168 million in reinvestment since they initiated the Main Street program. There are 387 new downtown apartments and a much lower vacancy rates from 22% to 4% over the years. And they've also had a lot of successes in community improvements in terms of activities, events, and attraction, and they said that there has been increased pride in place too. Moving on to the challenges, I think attracting new volunteers and avoiding burnout of those volunteers to run the operation has been challenging for them since, as I said earlier, they are mostly a volunteer-run organization. Expanding the downtown district has been something that they've come up with to, be a mechanism to get a little bit more money from the SID and include some more parcels within the Main Street district, but that has been a little bit of a challenge for them at the municipal level. Attracting a variety of businesses despite reduced vacancies, I think, that's a challenge that a lot of downtowns have these days in New Jersey and beyond, so that's something that they face. And then reestablishing the core Main Street aspects as far as design emphasis goes, that's also been a challenge as well. Some advice from Metuchen is to know and understand the challenges that your downtown faces so that you can craft your programs accordingly around that. And then to consult with other Main Street programs to see what they're doing that is working most effectively so that they can implement that in their own municipal program. Seek support from the Main Street New Jersey office. They provide trainings and organizational help, as well as the transformation grants that I talked about a little bit earlier. So they're very helpful in that through the DCA. And then form a steering committee, and then build and sustain political and public support is another thing that they definitely said was helpful in being able to develop interest in the Main Street program and further the activities that they put on. Okay, so next we'll talk about local perspectives a little bit from our community survey and business questionnaire, and I will hand it over to Leah.
So in order for us to understand how a Main Street would look in Dunellen and how business owners and other community members would feel about a Main Street program, we did do a community survey and a local business questionnaire. So the community survey, I'm hoping that this flyer looks familiar to everyone. So we wanted to understand how residents and frequent downtown visitors perceive downtown Dunellen along with changes they would like to see. It was emailed on a listserv, posted on the website and Facebook page. There was 22 questions and we wound up with 241 responses. So we compiled some of the main findings from the community survey. So First, we started off with a more general question, what attracts you to any downtown? We saw that most people responded that they said restaurant or bar attracts them, also community events and shopping. And then we got a little bit more specific, what attracts you to Dunellen, and a lot of people said community atmosphere, housing, and public transit access. We also wanted to see what kind of new businesses people were looking to see in downtown Dunellen. 50% of people said brewery. They also want to see kids entertainment, hobby stores, bookstores, pet stores, and coffee shops. We also wanted to get a feel of the community atmosphere in Dunellen. We also wanted to see what people wanted to change in the community atmosphere. So 58% of people said that they would like to see additional grocery store options, improved infrastructure, and additional public art. Also more benches. We also wanted to see what community events people wanted. Live music, street fairs, and more frequent farmers markets was our highest answer. We also conducted a business questionnaire. This was 11 questions. It was conducted in person. On the 28th, we went door to door. We got 9 responses. We also emailed several business owners looking for responses via email. We didn't get any responses via email, but we were lucky to talk to the 9 business owners that we did. So we asked them what they believe the strengths of Dunellen are. They said diversity, strong community, and that it was a high traffic area. They believe that the weaknesses are parking, lack of diversity in businesses. When asked if they would like to implement a Main Street program, they said yes, if it helps the community, that would be all right with them. When asked about a bidder SID, it was a little bit more split. 50% said that they believe it could be useful, and 50% didn't see a point in a business improvement district. So we also went through other complementary programs, maybe not a part of Main Street per se, but things that could be carried out by Main Street or just by the municipality themselves. So all of these photos were made through Photoshop from one of our researchers, and they're amazing. So we looked at other communities and saw what could potentially be done in Dunellen. So for murals, this is underneath, sorry, I don't know the road's name, but where the train station is, Washington Avenue, yes. That's what a potential mural could look like. Also community theaters, revamping the front to make it a little bit more attractive and to see, to attract more people. Bike stations, so that people could make their way downtown a little bit easier. We know that parking has been a contentious situation. We got that feel from the community and the business survey. So providing people with another mode of transportation could be nice. Shading sidewalks. Another way to get people to walk downtown is to not have that urban heat island effect in the downtown area. So putting trees up, having the walk be shaded so it's cooler. Safe streets. This includes safer pedestrian infrastructure and making sure that our crosswalks are clearly marked and able to be used. And that's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah and James, and to the entire Blaustein class and Dr. Listigan. A round of applause again. I'm sorry, Doctor. I will note they will be back on December 18th at our council meeting at 6 p.m. to do a more lengthy presentation to the Borough Council. So if you want to tune into that and hear more detail, please show up. We just thought this would be a great opportunity for the class to be present, to hear professionals in the field talk, but also the students be a part of the process of the conversation. So great work amongst the professionals. You held your own. Good job.
Rural action. And thank you for opening the doors.
Of course.
On the 18th, where will that meeting be?
Borough Hall in our council chambers. It's during our council meeting, which is usually at 7 p.m., but on December 18th at 6 p.m. because we moved some things so the choir, we don't interject with the choir concert. So, okay. Our final presentation, and the last 9 slides, out of 110, will be by Natalie Pinero. She is the founder of Inc. Creative Strategies, a boutique consultancy firm specializing in communication economic development strategies. They are a visionary partner dedicated to reshaping the future of business districts and commercial corridors. Natalie is a self-proclaimed champion to the creation of sustainable entrepreneurial ecosystems and the growth of local economies. She was among the inaugural class of 40 Under 40 award recipients from the Somerset County Business Partnership. They had a ceremony last night, right? Okay. For her efforts to support small businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. So Natalie, it's a great honor to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you. So I love Heart the Main Street program, and I think you guys did such a wonderful job of capturing the diversity of the program. As a matter of fact, talk about Kismet. One of the things that I noted on my LinkedIn today was a post from the National Main Street program that talked about how research shows that Americans are in favor of policies that would increase housing, especially the types of housing that many main streets can provide. And so I think it's really important that we're talking about redevelopment, right, as well, you know, as talking about revitalization and downtown revitalization, because that's really, you know, what we need. So I want to thank the mayor for giving me the opportunity to come out and chat with you guys all today. I am a self-proclaimed champion for small businesses. So today I want to talk about a couple things. So I want to talk about strong communities, right? And how many of us think that Dunellen deserves to be a strong community? Raise your hand. It's 100%, right? So we can all agree, right, that what we want is a strong community. And what we know is that strong downtown districts, business districts, commercial corridors stimulate our local economies, stimulate growth. And so they really play a crucial role in creating jobs, generating revenue, and enhancing the overall well-being of a local community. They contribute to the vitality, identity, and resilience of a region's economy and make them a critical component of a thriving and prosperous local economy. But there's challenges that face business districts, and we'll talk about those. And my specialty is in bids, SIDS, and DIDs, right, which is basically the same thing. And I want to talk about the experience that we've had in downtown Somerville. And what I'd love to talk about when it comes to Somerville is this story of renaissance, and how Somerville went from a town that was formerly called Scummerville, right, to, you know, the exciting and dynamic, diverse place that it is today. All right, so I already covered this, right? Importance of strong business districts, right? All of these exciting things are directly connected to strong commercial and business districts. We talked about economic growth, we talked about the jobs. You know, what I really love also is quality of life and community engagement, right? And I know you guys are tired, so I'm gonna try and move it along. So I love kind of doing a year-end review and kind of looking at all of the articles that are put out by our community partners and some, you know, thought leaders in our industry. And so for those of you who don't know Alana Prouse, she is the CEO and founder of Recast City, and her focus really is on light-scale manufacturing. But she put out a recent article that was called 7 Things That We Learned in 2023. And 2 things really resonated with me in working with small businesses and running various business improvement districts of different sizes and that have completely different demographics. And the first one is that the entrepreneurial ecosystem is broken. So while we have national funders, right, that are investing in entrepreneurs, minority businesses, few are investing in the ecosystem around those business owners. So once these trainings and grant programs are gone, there's no infrastructure that's left to tend to those business owners, their real estate business growth, and their capital needs. So now is the time to build those strong structures for them. And what I love about the redevelopment plan and the conversations that we're having today, right, is that we're not just talking about building housing, right? We're talking about building ecosystems that create social value. So the mayor and I seen each other at a conference recently, and we talked about transformative redevelopment, right? And that's what I think we're doing here today. So the second thing that was really clear in this article was that who owns property is a key determinant of the future. So we need systems in place to support business growth as sites change, to invest in locally owned properties dedicated to community use, and recognizing that space for local business is a public good, just like affordable housing. So one way that we can strengthen the small business ecosystem, right, that works hand in hand with the mayor's economic development strategies, redevelopment plan, and revitalization efforts is the special improvement district or business improvement district designation. So the New Jersey Special Improvement District legislation is designed to empower municipalities and local stakeholders to work collaboratively in revitalizing specific areas within their communities. So by providing a framework for dedicated funding and management, SIDS can contribute to the economic and social well-being of these designated districts. So there's a couple of key elements of the legislation, and I'll try to keep it brief because there are a few. So I won't go too much into the definition and the technicality of a special improvement district, but what you need to know is that it's a specific area within a municipality that is designated for concentrated redevelopment efforts. And it's intended to enhance the physical appearance, economic vitality, and overall quality of life within the district. So you also need a SID management or a business district management corporation, which our students talked about a little bit. And the district management corporation really oversees the operations and projects within the SID or the BID. And so it's typically a 501c3, as you guys mentioned. And the organization needs to have a board of trustees. And that board is usually comprised of business owners, property owners, and other stakeholders within the district. And that organization is responsible for developing and implementing plans, budgets, and projects that are aimed at improving the district. So we talked about funding, right? So one of the really wonderful things about the designation is that it gives us a dedicated stream of funding. We know that volunteer-run organizations are difficult to keep afloat, right? And it's difficult to keep those volunteers invested. And so you do need a dedicated stream of funding, not just to make sure that you have qualified professionals that are at the helm of the district management corporation, right, but to help execute those projects. So I started working in a district last year, and one of the board members said, well, I go out into the pocket park and I plant flowers myself every year. And so I said, well, that's lovely, and it's a wonderful act of service. You have a special improvement district, right, that generates funds for you to pay people to plant those flowers, right, and to make sure that they're being professionally done, right, so that we are empowering our district through infrastructure and beautification. So the funding, right, as our students mentioned, is an assessment that's typically based on property values or other criteria. And that is completely, right, at the discretion of the municipality, right? So there's no set fee structure for that assessment revenue. So, we've done work in districts that have a set assessment throughout the entire district. We've worked in other districts that have a staggered assessment depending on where in the district your business is. So before establishing a SID, we need to develop a plan, right? And so a detailed plan really outlines the goals, the strategies, the projects that are going to be undertaken with the SID designation, and that plan needs to be approved by the governing body. So the municipality also provides us support. So they pass an ordinance to create the SID and approve the special assessments, and they can also provide additional support like technical assistance or grant funding to help the SID achieve its goals. We have general governance. Again, we talked about being governed by a board of directors or a board of trustees that's responsible for overseeing the SID's activities. We must also be audited on a yearly basis to make sure that our finances, right, that we're spending the taxpayer dollars the way they need to be spent. And then finally, right, we talk about reporting and accountability, renewal and termination, right? That the SID does not have to always exist, right? So if the SID accomplishes its goals and is no longer needed, the SID can be expanded, or it can be renewed to continue to do the great work that it's doing. And what I love about this is that it's different from something like an urban enterprise zone, right? Where we have a dedicated stream of funding that's based on the property values within the district. So I'll talk a little bit more about the benefits when I talk about the case study for downtown Somerville. So as I mentioned previously, downtown Somerville was formerly known as Scummerville. And why? Right? It was known as Scummerville because the Bridgewater Commons, if you live in this area, right, you'll recall that the Bridgewater Commons came into the area. It's less than 2 miles from downtown Somerville, and it decimated the small business community, right? It was the height of mall culture, and people were abandoning the downtown, right, and going shopping at the Bridgewater Commons. And so at the time, Mayor Mike Kerwin had heard through the grapevine that Cranford had been one of the first towns that was designated as a special improvement district, and all of the wonderful things that were happening in Cranford and the revitalization that was taking place as a result. And so Mike met with Cranford and said, how do we make this happen? How do we bring it to Somerville? And it was a long road, and it wasn't just about the special improvement assessment. Right? It was also about working with the municipality to make sure that we were bringing in the right types of businesses, working to bring, Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, Somerset, right outside our district to help support that daytime foot traffic. But the special improvement district designation really helped us create a baseline for funding the improvements that were ultimately going to support local businesses, drive foot traffic, keep the district clean and safe, make infrastructure improvements, and move the ball forward to where we are today. So what we've seen as a direct result of the special improvement district designation, as well as our partnerships with community partners and the municipality, was increased investment, infrastructure beautification support, funding for business recruitment and retention services, programming support to create targeted events to drive foot traffic, dedicated marketing support. What we like to talk about is how we see ourselves as kind of an in-the-trees type of an approach to marketing. We market the district to get people interested in coming and exploring, right? And then we work hand in hand with our local businesses to make sure that they understand how to bring people through their own doors and sell their goods and their products and their services. So it's a partnership. We also, the designation also gives us strategic planning support, and as I mentioned previously, professional management. So finally, what do the numbers look like? Well, the district has about 164 first floor retail businesses. That's not counting our second floor and professional businesses. This is just
retail, restaurants, cafes. But we've been able to grow the programming in Somerville to include over 35 annual community events. We've created in the past 7 years alone, 500 new jobs. We have 1,400 residential units in and in walking distance of our district that are at 90% capacity or more and have a negligible impact on our school system. We have 4.6 million visits to our district per year, 900,000 unique visitors per year. Now, what does that mean? That means that we have people that love the district so much that they're coming back 2, 3, 4 times. They're spending money, they're spending time, they're stimulating our local economy by staying in our district an average of 111 minutes every time they come. So those things are all directly connected to what the designation has been able to do for not just Somerville, but other communities. Many of the communities that the students had on their map hold Main Street designations as well as BID, SID, and DID designations. Somerville is one of them, Bound Brook is another, Westfield is another, Cranford. And they do wonderful things in working hand in hand. So I really look forward to working with the borough to further explore the SID bid designation together with our stakeholders and all of you to create an action plan that would enable that transformative and responsible economic growth. So thank you all for your attention and your time, and I hope I
Okay, finally at that point. We will now give about, I know it's 9:30, we'll give about 15 minutes worth of question and answers period. So if we'll start with those who are in the room before we head online. There's a microphone in the middle of the room. Any questions from our audience members who are here in person?
I have a few.
Okay, join us, Mr. Checchio.
For the crowd, Bob Checchio, I live in 1836 West 4th. I've been here for 46 years. So I've seen a lot of changes in the town, and a lot of the changes involve traffic. So I'd like to know a few things about the traffic studies that have been done. Have they included the spillover effects from the downtown area onto the side streets? For example, last Thursday, I had trouble backing out of my driveway at 8:30 in the morning because traffic was backed up from the intersection of West 4th and Walnut. So there's been a dramatic increase in traffic in town over the last few years. And I'd like a better understanding of how all the development that is going on, with the hundreds of new apartments, might affect traffic, and also the possibility of new traffic lights having to be installed.
Okay, I can address better the second half if one of the professionals want to take the first.
Yeah, Mr. Checchio. So, a lot of the redevelopment projects in the downtown are not large traffic generators. I think there might be a cumulative effect of various projects, but when you look at each one individually, they don't generate a lot of traffic. And the majority of that development that's occurring on North Avenue, as I noted earlier, goes to the DOT for analysis. Now, they have a fairly high threshold when they kick in the need for improvements. I don't know that that's affecting the side streets that much, because I think maybe what's happening, what you're seeing is maybe people trying to bypass what's happening at some of the larger intersections and sneak through the neighborhoods.
That's what's happening.
I think the mayor's been very active in trying to get them to the table to talk about improvements along North Avenue, and that effort continues. So the largest project we had is the Dunellen Station project, and they were required required to put the traffic signal in at their entrance. They did a very comprehensive study. The DOT did not require anything of them along North Avenue to be done. But the county, and they required that improvement out of it. But I think we need to continue to try to bring the DOT to the table and get something done along North Avenue.
One more thing, for the traffic light.
No, if you have a follow from him, and then I'll.
No, it was a different subject.
Okay, so regarding the traffic lights, I'll try and piece this one by one. So as I noted, we are working through cost shared agreements, conversations with NJDOT at North Washington Avenue and North Ave, and Madison Avenue and North Ave. Each intersection is an interesting piece. One is a crossroad with a state and a municipal, so we're game, we're good to go if they say yes. The other one is a crossroad between a county and a state. So there's multiple jurisdictions that they go through. What we can assure you with those, we have not let up on the county or the state in terms of what we expect to be done. Again, there's a cost sharing piece to that, and that's also why we're negotiating the redevelopment agreements, these pedestrian traffic safety benefits, to help offset those costs so it does not impact the taxpayer. Again, with the rapid beacon push lights along, it'll be at Lincoln, Prospect, Sanford, and Boundbrook, and I believe Jackson, where a resident can walk up, press the button, the lights will flash, drivers will know that a pedestrian is going to enter into that zone or is already in that zone. That's also being negotiated. Well, that's actually been sent over to the state. They said a 12-month period. Well, welcome to New Jersey, bureaucratic red tape. We're still, look, Alex can tell you, we send an email at least once a month saying, what the hell is going on? We don't use hell in the email, but I'll say it again. Additionally, we are in conversations with the county. The county, we're having conduct several traffic light studies. They're restudying the traffic light at Newmarket and Washington, South Washington. I live off of South Washington Avenue, so I see the traffic backed up. In fact, I live in the cul-de-sac right behind where you live, so I know exactly what your issues are with the traffic buildup. So we're asking them to go back and see if they can re-regulate that light, the timing measures, as well as because what we've noticed is when it turns green on Newmarket, people are going, you're kind of playing Frogger in the road if you're crossing that. So that's one location we're having them look at. We're having them look at also Prospect and Walnut, Grove, Newmarket and Whittier, as well as Whittier and Newmarket. So locations where it's county roads meet municipal roads and it's become highly trafficked. We also just received $170,000 in local aid grants towards more rapid beacon pedestrian lights. I can't do this because that's what they look like to me when I'm going across instead of doing the chicken dance. At Orange Street coming actually into the park, and if it doesn't work out with the county on Grove, Newmarket, and Whittier, we have funding to put them there as well to help ease pedestrian traffic safety. So our mind is there, and our argument to these stakeholders that are higher jurisdictions, and look, they're at the table, they're having the conversations, but as they say to me, you're not the only town, and I say, well, I'm the mayor of one town that I only have to worry about, so I'm going to keep bugging about this town. We're all at the table having the conversation, and it's in mind, it's just sometimes it takes a little time. So regardless of the traffic studies in which he's saying, we are taking that into consideration of where lights should be, how are we slowing down traffic as it is coming into town, and what safety measures we can put into place that pedestrians feel safe crossing these roads.
All right, by the way, just to note, the pedestrian crossing things where you push a button to stop, they're extensively used in England, and they work in England.
Yes.
And they work out very well. Okay, one more question, and then I'll sit down. I think I picked up that with the pilot, none of the pilot money goes to the school system, it goes to the town and
correct.
A small portion to the county. Does that mean if there are increases in school costs because of the incremental number of school children, that all of that would be picked up by the other property owners?
No, what it does mean is it gives the municipality the ability those dollars go.
Okay.
Whereas only 26% of the property taxes we have control over. And this is how it works. You have a pie chart, okay? You have a pie chart. When you go pay the tax office, you pay us. You pay the Borough of Dunellen. That goes to the Borough of Dunellen. We have all these tax districts that we have to levy the taxes for. So regardless of what revenue comes in the tax year, let's say, we're left holding the bag after everything is paid out. We're the last one to have that cash to pay our operational expenses. So if taxes are delinquent in a regular year without a pilot, you know, the town, the borough side, municipal government side is kind of screwed. The school's fine, the library's fine, the county's fine, the state's fine, but we're left, how do we figure out paying all our operation expenses if taxes are delinquent? What this does, it gives the town the ability to better financially control how we use those funds. In reality, what should be happening is then it stabilizes the municipality side of the taxes or lowers them, so then therefore technically offsets, in theory, what any, you know, because it's not in practice just yet, in theory, what increases are coming from the school district. And so there are other towns. I kind of actually like the Mayor McCormick theory of the game, which is you use pilot funds from the town to assist in capital expenses with the school, such as any sport fields that need to be improved for programs. If they have to add another classroom, we can consider assisting them in that capital expense. But this gives the borough the opportunity to better control how those dollars are spent. If not, it goes over to another governing body to make that decision. And that's no disrespect to the Board of Education, but in theory, a lot of this is commercial, so, you know, so it gives us the ability to control that. I hope I answered your question. Okay. The pie chart one is the one. I always like to use that argument. Okay, anybody else in the audience before we head to online? Yes, Mr. Baudendistel.
Good evening, everyone. It was great hearing from everyone. I'm really excited that we're moving forward with the redevelopment of Dunellen. Natalie, specific about the SID, because that's been talked about for years and never got off the ground. The assessment that funds the program, who does the assessment, who gets charged that assessment? Is it the business district or?
So basically what happens is during the creation of the plan, a district area will be outlined, and it's the commercial properties within that district that that the assessment goes to, right? And so, for example, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Verve in Somerville. So they're a medium-sized restaurant that's on East Main Street. Their total property value is about $600,000. The assessment is 0.087. And so with that calculation, they end up paying around $5,000 a year to the SID, the Special Improvement District. In other communities, it's, you know, I believe Bound Brook is 0.0067, right? So, you know, what that rate is a conversation that we work together, right, based on the redevelopment or the revitalization goals, right, to structure that assessment accordingly.
And is there, so the initial feedback from those business owners, how often is it where you gotta negotiate with them, where you gotta really convince them that it's worth it? And then obviously when you start receiving the funds for the SID program, it'll take some time before they see, look, I've paid into this thing now 3 years and I don't see any benefit yet. Because I'm sure it takes time to build funds before you could do something significant enough for them to reap the benefits, right?
So, couple things. So there is an immediate return on investment, right? When you start generating, when you create your budget and you start collecting that SID revenue, that is why the relationship with the municipality is so important, because we work together with the municipality to make sure that we're getting programs off the ground that are important to the business community. So it really is a conversation and a lot of data collection from business owners that's really going to drive where that investment goes. right? And so it's funded in various districts. We're looking at clean and safe programs where we have you know, sidewalk sweepers that come out and pick up garbage, that sweep the sidewalks. You know, it funds plantings, flower pots, right? Very visible things in the district. One of the things that is really important, or a really important conversation when we're trying to recruit businesses into a district, especially when you're looking at recruiting national brands, is the first question that they're gonna ask you is, you know, what are some comparable sales figures from your retailers and what does your foot traffic look like? And so we start out with the conversation of what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? How do we get the foot traffic? How do we get the sales numbers up, right? So we start with those visible programs.
Okay, I just wanted to understand that a little bit better.
Sure.
And then, Mayor, I'm sorry, just one more. Dan, when we're talking about the planning of the future plans of Dunellen and all the 12 projects that are on the board right now, the retail space is critical. So for instance, if we want a restaurant, you know, the retail space right now that's going into where Dale's Auto was, I don't know who was using that as a point. The retail space is too small to accommodate a restaurant. And so I'm noticing the buildings that are going up all have these small retail spaces, maybe 1,500 square feet. That's not a lot. You're very limited of who you're gonna recruit to go into our downtown. And if we're looking for a more diverse downtown, we need to have a more diverse square footage of opportunity for somebody to open a business. That's all. Thank you, though.
Thank you,
It's
Ken.
excellent.
I'm actually not, well, I'm sorry.
No, I'm making a point more than asking a question. So hopefully we're considering that in the planning for the future.
No, it's a great point, and I appreciate you being here, and it's actually a follow-up question I was gonna have now, and you made me have a question for Natalie, is what is the average square footage in some of these, like Picasso's in Somerville? What's that square footage?
So we consider restaurants an anchor. And so most of our more popular restaurants are ranging anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 square feet. But the interesting thing is that on the retail side, right, we have retail spaces that are between 3,000 and 5,000 square feet that we have a very hard time filling. So when we're bringing in retail, right, we like to talk with our property owners about subdividing the space so that the space is no more than 2,500 square feet, because that's where we see the most inquiries for retail, right? And we try and curate that retail to make sure that we're bringing in complementary businesses.
And I think it also comes down to conversations with the developer that you need to be willing to have. With like 440, we had the conversation, and they're designing with the thought in it with a kitchen in mind. And I believe 501 is working to put a diner or a small restaurant in their location. It's going to be in their actual rendering and conceptual plan. So I think it's just having those honest conversations, and like you said, ensuring spaces are big enough for these developers, for restaurants to be attractive to them. So in terms of the SID, I want to point out, just historically, as you noted, yes, we've always been talking about this, but I think right now it's a prime time because in the past, in Dunellen has always had smaller properties, property owners and parcels, so that assessment would be really left on the small guy and gal who owns these properties. Now with these projects coming along, the assessment can be a little bit larger with these bigger property owners contributing into it, and it's not left on smaller property owners. There's a fair share of how the money's coming in. So I think now with these new projects, the conversation should be started. So me personally. So anybody else in the audience this evening with a question, and then we can head over to anybody online.
I'm just checking to see if anyone has anything written in the chat.
Anybody online that has any questions, you can speak up, say your name, and ask your question. If not, we're checking the chat box right now.
We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you, Rebecca. Can you type in? We cannot hear you, Rebecca. Can you type in?
Rebecca, we're having trouble hearing you. Are you able to type in the chat box?
In the meantime.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Regarding any pilots, I know, is there any provision in the pilot for any projects for adjustments due to inflation? Or are they stuck at what they negotiated at originally?
There can be. Usually that is part of the negotiation, that's part of the calculations that Dan looks into. So that's part of what he is evaluating in the calculations and the pro formas. So when he looks at, 10% for the first 5 years, 11% for the next, 10 years, that is part of what he's taking into consideration. I don't know, Dan, if you want to go into more detail on that?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, on most residential projects, the percentage of gross revenue is sort of accounting for inflation as rents go up. As rents go up, the pilot amount increases. As rents go down, the pilot amount decreases to a certain level, as long as it doesn't get down to the minimum annual service charge. Where we see the additional, including an additional buffer, if you will, where you could take into account an annual percentage increase, is more on the industrial and commercial projects, where you have the calculation is truly the greater of a percentage of gross revenue or a per square foot amount, and that per square foot amount could increase by, we typically use 2%. So it always looks at a percentage of gross revenue or a per square foot number. But that's typically not done in residential projects.
Thank you. Do we have the question yet from online?
All right, the question from Rebecca is, I'm concerned about the setbacks for new projects. For example, the apartment building going up where Boundbrook Road and North Ave intersect. It appears too close to the road with not enough space for pedestrians, trees, and snow removal? And snow. The setback should be at least the size of the one in front of Mis Amigos.
Well, thank you, Rebecca, for that question, and I'm proud that this administration solved that problem. Those two properties were actually designed, where did I hit? Were designed underneath the old zoning laws before I became mayor. And so those projects were in the pipeline, and at that time, the properties were able to be developed right to the property line, front, back, and sideways. Those were two learning and experience projects because, as we noted, they were underneath the zoning laws before I became mayor. The amendments were not necessarily made just yet, and so they had to be approved underneath the zoning laws, or else what do we face? A builder's remedy, and then we lose our zoning authority. So they're built under those laws. Since we realized that situation and those should not be right to the property line, front, back, and sideways, we have set now that all future development projects should be minimum 16 feet back from the curb. And is it 12 feet? 12 feet back from the backyard. So if you're a residential property and your backyard butts up against one of these developments, they can no longer go to the property line. They have to be 12 feet back. Same thing with front side. That's a conversation to have in the sense of if you're developing the downtown, most buildings are side by side anyway. So we are very much in favor of creating a streetscape where pedestrians have accessibility and walkability, and also creates a green atmosphere for quality of life enhancement. And those improvements were done over the last 3 years. So thank you for that question. I'm happy we're able to address it before your question. Next question.
All right, and the follow-up for that is, thank you. Now that it is built, how will the pedestrian pass with snow?
The property owners, correct me if I'm wrong, underneath the redevelopment agreement, they have to maintain it. So it comes down onto any other property maintenance ordinance. If they don't do it, they get fined through code and they have to go to court, or they've neglected the redevelopment agreement, which jeopardizes their ability for the financial agreement.
The agreement will be satisfied if all done just under typical property maintenance codes.
Typical property maintenance code. But it's a good question. It's a legitimate concern, but much like any of us who have a sidewalk in front of our property, we have to maintain it. just like they will have to. Any other questions online?
I don't see any active mics or
Okay,
anything. Sorry,
anybody
One
inside?
more follow-up from Rebecca says.
Okay, last question, Rebecca, because everyone's getting a little antsy here, I can see them.
Please include the out-of-district placement costs in the school age costs.
Please include it as a recommendation moving forward.
Potential out-of-district costs.
Well, Dan, you're the
Yeah, we can
professional, we're
have-
gonna take your recommendation.
We can absolutely consider that.
Okay. Thank you for that opinion. Students, anybody? Okay. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Let's give a round of applause for our professionals and for the students and the faculty. Look, Dunellen is going through a renaissance. This is an important conversation. So again, we're going to have this again next year. Looking forward to it. And one last plug, please join us tomorrow night at 6 p.m. in Washington Memorial Park for the Christmas tree lighting, and Santa will be there. And I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and a Happy Holiday season. Have a good New Year.
Hey, yo, all right, what I want to know about this